brings to you Scripting a Renewable Future, an event which will seek to address the important issues, opportunities, and the emerging trends in the energy ecosystem, and also to explore how governments and the private sector corporations can really collaborate, also reset and redirect their efforts to make India a self-sufficient in the clean energy ecosystem as well as emerge as a global leader in this space. The rising greenhouse emissions, we all know, due to the burning of fossil fuels, are actually posing a severe threat to environmental sustainability, the biodiversity of the planet, and people's lives and livelihoods. The COVID-19 pandemic and the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war has resulted in significant energy resource disruption. 2070, India's target for achieving net zero. The country is talking the talk on fast-tracking decarbonization. But are we walking the walk? Despite being a developing nation with huge population, are all stakeholders really playing their part in leaving a greener future for the future generations? And that's going to be the focus of today's event. To answer these pertinent questions, we're going to be joined by the who's who of the renewable energy ecosystem today. But let me also tell you about our own initiative from Business Today. Inspired by this opportunity to really serve larger societal purpose, we have articulated small changes that actually may seem a little insignificant, but we must remember that we are all part of the billions of people. And if we change even the tiniest of things together, we can make a huge difference. Today's event is one such example. To this effect, our choice of hotel, ITC Moria, is the propagator of renewable energy, and which is why this event is being hosted here. Also, you can see that the set design behind me has been made by using reusable materials. The glass bottles on your tabletops have been used instead of the single-use plastic bottles. Also, you can actually see sustainable serveware on your tables with light bites that you can continue to enjoy during the event. The menu today has been carefully crafted and designed, where you will experience root-to-shoot, local produce, ancient grains, which also you can enjoy during the course of this entire evening. And now, ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart this evening of discussions and thought-provoking insights, I'd like to welcome on stage Mr. Amit Jain, Global CEO of Sterling & Wilson Renewable Energy Group. Mr. Jain, we all know, is a veteran in the EPC sector with over 30 years of experience in various industries such as renewable energy, oil and gas, also chemical process plants, power transmission, and telecom infrastructure. May I please request Mr. Jain to please deliver the keynote address.
Good evening, everyone. It gives me immense pleasure to be here today amongst visionaries from the renewable energy industry. I would like to thank each of you for your presence. As you are aware, the theme of the event is Scripting a Renewable Future. We aim to bring all of you together to connect and discuss the roadmap for India's energy transition and how we, as an industry, can collaborate to achieve this. India is pioneering a new model of economic development that could avoid the carbon-intensive approach. The use of renewable energy not only helps in the primary objectives of advancing economic development and mitigating climate change, but also improves energy security and energy access. The Honorable Prime Minister has laid out India's commitment towards climate action at COP26 in his Panchamrit statement as 5-point action agenda. The union budget presented by the finance minister recently also spoke about green energy growth as one of the 7 main priorities for development. This highlights the firm intent of the government to move rapidly towards carbon reduction and net zero. To achieve the commitment and target envisaged, energy transition will be the most important pillar moving ahead. In fact, India has taken great strides forward to to expand renewable energy capacities. We now stand fourth globally in the renewable energy installed capacity, including the large hydro, and the fourth in the solar capacity. The nation is on the cusp of solar energy revolution as cumulative solar installations have reached 50 gigawatt milestone. In fact, it added around 14 gigawatt of new solar capacities in 2022. As the country moves forward towards its 2030 goal, solar will continue to dominate the new capacity additions in renewable space. The war in Ukraine and its consequences and worsening impact of climate change have dominated new headlines across the world. We have read about volatility in global energy prices, concern about energy shortages, and record drought affecting the agricultural production at a time when the food prices were already rising. These all issues are interconnecting, and perhaps moving to renewable is not just a good idea for environment, but it will lead to new economic approach to solving a lot of problems today and tomorrow. It's also a continuous strategic investment to ensure that India, as our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji announced, should be energy independent by 2047, which also be century of our independence. We at Sterling and Wilson Renewable Energy are extremely optimistic about the future of renewable energy in the country. The production processes have become more efficient and per unit price have already dropped. There are fluctuations in manufacturing cost, certainly, but over time these costs have only gone down. This runs in parallel with government policies supporting the world's transition to a lower carbon economy. Today, being one of the largest global solar EPC player spread over 28 countries, we are proud to be part of this great energy transition. With the strong backing of Reliance and SP Group, strong EPC portfolio of around 14 gigawatt and operation and maintenance portfolio of 7 gigawatts, we are well poised to capitalize on the opportunities coming our way and to create new ones. Our services encompasses a comprehensive range of concept to commissioning projects, including design, engineering, procurement, construction, and end-to-end project management. We have begun leveraging emerging opportunities by expanding our renewable energy offerings. We also now providing EPC solution for hybrid energy power plants and energy storage. Like always, we aim to deliver spectacular, high-quality, cost-efficient solar energy solutions and achieve utmost customer satisfaction. As we are all aware, there is a lot to be achieved on energy transition. Together, we should take this opportunity of driving this shift towards renewable energy. We need to come together for the larger good of society and make this shift happen. I hope this summit will give some food for thought during today's interactions. I am excited to hear the conversation and outcome of the panel schedule and very curious to hear from our Honorable Minister, Shri R.K. Singh. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And once again, thank you for attending this event. Look forward to meeting you in person. Before I conclude, I would also like to thank Witness Today team for successfully organizing this event of this magnitude. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Jain, for setting that context. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the first panel discussion for this evening, I'd like to now invite Mr. N. Ramesh, Deputy Managing Director, India Exim Bank. Also joining him will be Mr. Anish Mandal, Partner, Deloitte India. Let me also welcome on stage Mr. Raj Kumar Roy, MD and CEO, Empire Energy. Mr. Sunil Badesra, Country Head, Sungrow India Private Limited, and also Ms. Shilpa Urhikar, National Head, Domestic Sterling and Wilson Renewable Energy Limited. The panel discussion will be on decoding the future trends in energy transition, and to moderate this panel, I am joined by Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today TV. On the stage, please. Huge round of applause.
Very good afternoon and a warm welcome once again to everybody here, my panel and all the guests and viewers who are tuning in on the various platforms of Business Today multiverse, including Business Today Television and on Business Today In, as well as Business Today on YouTube and other platforms. My panel here is a very eclectic panel, very well-chosen panel, and I would say we'll be able to get a mix of views in the 45 odd minutes that we have on this discussion today. And since we are talking about future trends, we'll try and keep the focus on the future, and the future is always better. At least that is the mantra that most Indians live by. We look at the future and are able to go beyond the present. I'm going to start with Mr. Ramesh in terms of the subject for our energy transition. Transition is a pretty simple word, but it involves a lot of painstaking detail. Moving out of what is a carbon-fed economy is an imperative for India. It's also backed by the need from a climate point of view, but it's a massive cost. And globally, while the developed nations have been talking about this transition, they haven't really put their money behind where their mouth is as far as helping countries like India achieve this transition in a sustainable and fast manner. But that's the broader picture. What I really want to ask you about is how critical is the role of finance in India's energy transition towards a green, renewable, sustainable future? Mr. Ramesh. Yeah, here you go with the mic.
Thank you, Siddharth.
Just hold it closer.
Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful to see all the ladies and gentlemen, who's who of the industry here. Of course, it all starts with finance. So, I naturally expected this could be the first question for this panel discussion. To give a context, what are the financing, requirement we are looking at for, energy, green energy or clean energy? If we just look at the targets given or undertaken by Government of India, is humongous. The kind of energy transition declaration of having 50% of energy requirement by 2030 to be met by non-fossil fuels. So that's about nearly 500 gigawatt of energy to be coming from clean sources of energy. The kind of investment that is going into every kind of value chain in this particular sector is going to be humongous. Now, we have seen this playing out in the last decade, a variety of financing options coming in. Just to start with, the green bonds were the rage for a good part of time. Of course, the traditional debt instruments provided by the financial institutions like us, India Exim Bank, particularly we are in the long-term financing, 10 to 15 years or 20 years also. So that's where the requirement or all the ratios of such a projects work out better. So apart from India Exim Bank, Government of India has also put in place the NAFID, which is another financial institution looking into the infrastructure segment, which is coming into play. And today we saw their bond rising news also coming into play. Apart from that, all the developmental banks also are coming in this space very aggressively. The African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, all of them are supporting this particular cause and have been bringing in new structures in place. For a financial institution, we need to first have a clarity on how the price discovery has happened. I think India has demonstrated it in a wonderful manner. I think the whole world is also following that particular model as well. Further, on the offtake risk, again, there is an aggregation of demand and an assurance of payment coming in by the government-led institutions are there, which is a great learning for the whole world also. Then there are insurance products which are trying to cover different kinds of risk associated with this sector. I think whatever risk mitigation measures financial institution look forwards, they are all available. Just on an end note, the kind of complexity the project can have. One of the project, one of our major customer who is actually working with this particular program is implementing a project in Australia, which is conceived in UK, funded by Korean entities, put out in Western Australia, and supported by an Indian financial institution. So this is the global situation what we are looking at.
Right, absolutely. And the risks are unique, and we can talk about that. Since we have a mix on the panel, what I want to do is I want to get the industry view first, and I'll go to Sunil at the extreme left of the panel to sort of Sunil, the question about the transition, a lot of people only focus on the Ambani, Adani, the Jindals and all the big companies which sort of get more mind space and media share sometimes. But a lot of innovation is happening in other companies that may not be that well known or marketed. Purely from the transition that is being done by Indian companies and Indian jugaad, if I may use that word, what could you share with our audience?
So as you mentioned rightly that innovation, what has happened and the way how we have reached what we were doing 5 to 6 years back, the kind of tariff which was there in the renewable industry was even, it was more than 10 rupees. That was the tariff. And the innovation which has happened in the industry, the kind of companies which has come in these last 5 to 6 years has been able to give some innovative product to the industry, and that is the reason why today we are sitting at the tariff. I think the lowest tariff which went in India was around 1.99. So you can see starting from 15 rupees or 18 rupees, now it has touched that 1.99 also. And all this has been possible because of the continuous innovation which is happening in the industry. So as I am from the, basically from the one of the supplier of the project solar plants which is happening is major, the component is the inverter part. So I'm basically representing that company. So lot of innovation is happening in the inverters and even in the module segment also, which is actually creating the kind of advantages which developer or EPCs can get out of it. And the reason they are optimizing their cost, the project cost they are optimizing, and based on that, I think the outcome is in front of everyone, that kind of tariff which has been invented in the industry. So this kind of things if continuously happening, so I think maybe like in industry which we have seen even in the Middle East, the tariff is even far lower than what we are operating in India. So maybe we'll see soon the days when we are maybe operating the tariff which is even lower than 1.99.
Since Sunil has spoken about tariffs, I don't know how many of you here would recall that the curve on tariffs at least that industry is talking about here, and before we started this panel, this was also being discussed with other people, mirrors what happened in telecom in India. And 18 rupees was one of the earlier call rates, and you know what has happened. It's not strictly comparable, but the point is that India is such a large market that for the first few years or maybe even a decade and a half, companies, regulation, policy makers will struggle at arriving at an optimal fit. And because we are a resource dependent nation, many parts of this renewable energy industry chain, we are still dependent on overseas. Therefore, the risk and the execution challenges multiply. Mr. Roy, I'm coming to you on the point. Maybe you could explain this from your industry and the segment that you operate in really. How significant has this transition been in India if you were to compare it globally? In many sectors, we have moved far ahead of other countries. Fintech is just one example. So using that sort of outsider's perspective, I'm asking you to explain to the lay audience here, how much have we achieved and how far is still that we need to walk on.
Thanks, sir. So if you ask me that to what extent we have really transitioned, I think we are still, say, scratching the surface, except in one area that we have been the world leader in achieving the sustainable tariff and perhaps the lowest in the world, I will say, other than, say, the Gulf region where you have sun god really shining.
But is lowest sustainable from an operator's point of view?
Yeah, sustainable for everyone, and I'll explain that why.
Okay, yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah. But if you ask me that whether we have really gone to the transition mode, perhaps still not, and I'll tell the reason. The biggest reason is that, see, the renewable is an energy which will flow to the user in form of electron through electricity boards. Now, till the time you have a commercial entity which decides what is to be supplied and how much to be supplied, all your effort finally gets bottlenecked at that point in time. I'll just touch upon one point on finance. I can tell you one thing. There is hordes of money which is actually waiting in the pipeline to be invested in India in Indian IPPs. You are not getting them because, what do they say? Oh, you do the, say, bidding in, say, 2019. We are still waiting for PPAs to be signed in 2020 end. We still have, say, in 21, I do not know whether in 21 or 22 I will be able to start the project. Why? Who decides that that project will come up finally? It is the electricity boards. So till the time you really bring the commercial entities there, we will struggle in terms of transition.
I want to interject here since you speak about the reform of our power distribution, and by default, therefore, it really means reforming and changing the extent of state control on our distribution boards and the associated political issues. Are you therefore saying that we should not be hopeful? Because it's not happened really for the last 25 years that I have seen this subject.
Correct, correct. And unfortunately, we still are not moving in that direction, as much I can tell you.
Okay.
Right?
So one of the future trends, Mr. Roy, since we're on that subject, what would you therefore say needs to be done to ensure that our transition is quick and long-term sort of good for everyone?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately is say into the constitutional quagmire, if I can say, because if electricity is in, say, your state subject or concurrent subject, it is only as much where the federal government can do. You have states.
Are you saying that states are not on board with the center?
Absolutely.
Is center?
Absolutely.
Why would that be? Because I find it perplexing. The states are who actually cater to their voters, to their masses. Why wouldn't they want to adopt newer things and do that in a sustainable manner?
It's very simple that whether you have the courage to sustain through the period when the transition really happens. Because nobody is going to like you during the transition. I'll just give you one example. So we sell power to SECI, right? And we sell power to Juvenile. If you just look at, say, the tariff, what is discovered by both of them, at times Juvenile actually beats SECI. What does it mean? It simply means that somebody has taken that pain to reform the way electricity is bought and distributed and money collected.
Okay, okay. You want to step in and then I'll go. Yes, yeah. We can open up. Everyone can please step in. Feel free to make this interactive.
No, I think very valid point, but there is a ray of hope in this. The central government is taking all measures to bring the state electricity companies and the distribution companies in to toe the line. I think this budget has this very specific, innovative approach of linking the state, borrowing capacity with reforms in DISCOM efficiencies. So I think that's a very innovative approach. I think we can see a lot more coming in.
I certainly hope that shows results, because I remember it was exactly 20 years ago when the new electricity policy had come in, and that had a significant chapter on distribution reforms. You wanted to come in, please. Step in, please, Shilpa. And then go ahead,
Hello.
it's on. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
So yeah, I was wanting to supplement what Mr. Roy said here, because what we see is that developers today are facing multitude of challenges.
Okay, sorry, I think there's some. Yeah.
No, it's working. Hello.
Yeah.
I wanted to further add to what Mr. Roy said, that the developers today are facing multitude of challenges, and it's not I mean, he picked up one example. I'm sure there are many. And I want to add to that example as well. But the challenges are from all quarters. So it is, one is the discoms where the PPAs need to be signed. The PPAs are long-term PPAs. We've also seen the discoms wanting to renegotiate those PPAs where, you know, the whole financial model was built and now they want to go back on their commitments. There are other challenges of supply chain. And that is, I think, one of the major hurdles of our solar industry.
I would argue that perhaps industry will find its way around supply chain bottlenecks. Industry is very flexible, especially private sector companies are able to pivot very quickly. Perhaps there should be some sort of law that prevents a rethink. It's not cash on delivery that you change your mind and send the product back. PPAs signed by state government entities, they shouldn't be able to change them, especially if the process is fair and discovered, and minus any legal challenge to infirmities in the process, they should simply not be allowed to do that.
Also, discoms have their own issues. They are debt-ridden. They have not been able to pay on time. So even if they don't go back, they still are not even able to support the projects that are in hand, that are ongoing. So that is one issue. The supply
I think
chain,
Delhi Discom is a good example in that regard, Shilpa. There is an element of subsidy, but if you look at it whole, across the Discoms in Delhi, the subsidy is being borne by the budget in some ways, and it's not coming onto the books of the distribution company.
so I was just going to touch that topic, that how do we change this? And the way to do this is learn from these discoms. One is the GUVNL, second is the Delhi. So privatization of discoms have actually shown that the AT&C losses have been cut down from 55% to less than a single digit number.
Absolutely.
So that kind of change needs to come in the other state discoms as well.
That's a very interesting point, and if you see that crux of the discussion so far, while we are looking at the future, the leap into the future is being held back by present day problems which are from the past. Anish, you've been listening to this, and I saw you shake your head when I said that maybe Delhi Discom had a better model. Expand on that.
Of course,
and feel free to disagree as much as you want to.
Not sure whether it's working.
Yeah.
Okay, right. No, I think absolutely what's been said is pertinent. But just that it's not that the states are not on board with the center. It requires time in India. Whatever changes we do are incremental and not necessarily ad hoc and completely kind of transformational. So we are very closely working with the government of India, and I think energy transition is a subject very close to the heart. So when you are talking about the discoms not signing PPAs because there was no resource adequacy planning as such guidelines and as well as regulations from the center, right? So they had this kind of perceived notion that they have surplus and therefore they're not tying up or not pushing back all the PPAs, and especially the long-term PPAs at 25 years. So of course the center is working towards bringing down those PPAs to 15 years. That's one, 10 to 50 years. Secondly, there is a resource adequacy guidelines which has already been kind of drafted and it will be soon out as a regulations. So that will kind of regularize the planning process, which requires, say for example, how much I need to procure in the next year to the next 5 years has to be determined through a scientific process, and that was not happening. So therefore that will enable the discoms to sign PPAs, right? And the PPAs could be of multiple nature. It's not necessarily 15 years. It could be only peak. It could be round the clock. It could be only STOA, MTOA, whatever. But that will come out of a scientific model. That will perhaps see the uptake of all the renewables which has been stuck, as Mr. Roy was correctly highlighting. Though the bidding process has happened in 2019, still those PPAs are taking place and the discoms are pushing back. There is perceived notion.
Yeah, complete your point. I just wanted to...
No, there's perceived notion at long period of time that renewables is not really the cost which is coming out, but a much bigger cost for the discoms. That has already been showed in several modeling exercises. No, renewables is the cheapest cost of electricity. Even if you add all the transmission and other things as well, still it forms the cheapest cost.
No,
So those
that was my next question, and I'm glad you picked it up. We'll go across the panel, starting with you on this point. Explain the numbers, if you can, off the top of your head, in terms of why you say that renewables are not costly. I'll just give you one quick example. When there was a debate in the Indian Railways with regard to reducing diesel consumption, I think at one point of time the peak annual bill used to range well over near to 5,000 crore, the diesel annual consumption of the railways, and there was a lot of internal discussion on electrification. One of the opposing views within the railways on electrification was the initial cost and the switchover cost. And I think that battle has still not been won within the railways. But using that as an example in the simplest manner that you can, explain to us in the pricing matrix, where does renewables stand?
Yeah, no, so leave aside the must-run status, and renewables will always form is actually outside the merit order. Leave that. But if you do any kind of merit order stacking, including all the renewable costs, which is discovered, say 2.7, 2.8, right now, the alternative is what we have is, say, for example, hydro, coal, nuclear, and anything if you stack up. So even if, say, for example, thermal new built coal stations, coal-based thermal stations would be somewhere around 4.5 rupees to 5 rupees, right? So that's the levelized cost of electricity, whereas over here it's around 2.7, 2.8. Now the transmission cost also, if you add with the utilization factor, that's also somewhere around 1 rupee, 1.2 rupees. So even if we add that, under all circumstances in all modeling exercises, renewables is becoming the cheapest cost of electricity to be added going forward. Now the challenge
is there a number that you can share, let's say, looking forward, 2025, what's like a per unit cost that you can average out?
Yeah, no, so there are several projections how renewables will behave, but the kind of scale which we are talking about in energy transition, as I was saying, so 2070 net zero ambitions which the government has. Today we are 120 gigawatt of renewables. We are talking about 2,000 gigawatt of solar alone which is required, somewhere around 700 gigawatt of wind which is onshore, 130, 170 gigawatt of offshore, and somewhere around 500 gigawatt of battery storage. These are some of the numbers which have come out in modeling to achieve a net zero target of 2070, right? So this includes like green hydrogen and all that, and for that, somewhere around another 600, 700 gigawatt of renewables what is required. So if you are talking about this kind of scale, then of course the numbers which are today at 2 rupees or 2.5 rupees, that's definitely going to come down. Right?
Sunil, you were coming. Yeah, and Mr. Roy after
Saying
that.
that as he was mentioning about the challenges, discom fights and other things which are happening. It is not holding these projects, also impacting the supply chain process. It is also holding the investment, which should come actually from outside India, because we have limited technology available in India, so we need to get the more investment. So when we are talking about the investment in India, we are getting the investment, but when we see these kind of uncertainties in the market, these kind of fights or some uncertainties which has been created by discoms and the government, so this create the confusion kind of things for the investor also, who has to get the investment in India.
Right.
And I'm not sure we want definitely the tariff should get better, what is there on today, but these issues need to be addressed on priority so that all the investors, as a manufacturer, we also want to invest more money in India.
Right.
But sometimes we face these kind of challenges. We want to recruit more people. We want to bring more we want to create more big setup here. But sometimes because of projects are getting delayed by 1 year or 2 year, extension keeps on coming. So these kind of steps sometimes blocks these kind of investment which should come to India.
Mr. Roy, you were.
Yeah, so I'd just like to add, say, one thing on the cost, and we need to be, say, fair to ourselves, fair to the state electricity boards. So renewable power, is it, say, the lowest cost energy? My answer is clearly no, and I'll tell you why. If I need to supply you, let us say, 4 units and 1 unit, say, every 1/4 of the day, if my source can supply, say, 2 units in 50% of the time, now somebody is keeping something warm to supply you in those when I'm not available, right? So the cost of keeping that backup that definitely need to be added and added
Into
transparently into that.
Okay.
Because then basically you see the cost of renewable. Maybe you need to incentivize, or you need to say pass on something to strategy board where they are encouraged that, okay, if I'm buying at 2 rupees, somebody is paying me for what I'm not getting. There's another issue here that, see, and that's possible today. We have, say, all kinds of the smart transmission, smart metering and all. We need to identify the customer segments who are not really the continuous users of the energy. And if we can really have dedicated infrastructure for those where they are basically, say, consuming that energy when it is getting consumed, you then separate out the cost for the other segment, right? So some kind of different energy accounting is really required over there. I will just like to add one point to electricity boards. We talked about it. The fundamental issue is that is a government entity will ever be able to run a, say, distribution business efficiently? If not, you will always have issue. And your biggest issue will always come in form of dearth of capital, which basically drives everything.
Right.
So that's the fundamental at the electricity boards. But electricity cost for the renewable, that's definitely significant than what it looks like.
I want to add another element here, unless the panel wants to debate this point, and this is, again, to try and keep this simple for a wider audience. Our hill states, many decades ago, chose to focus on renewable energy in terms of hydro projects. Himachal and Uttarakhand and a little bit of Jammu and Kashmir focused on this. There were other projects as well. In the most recent past, we have seen this controversy around hydropower in Uttarakhand with regard to the environmental concerns. The question I'm asking the panel, and this hopefully will tell us about the reality, is about the other costs in some ways, or impact of one of the components of renewable, hydro, which I believe will increasingly perhaps go out of favor due to the environmental degradation and fears that it is stoking. Is that a fair question to ask? Do you want to, yeah, Shilpa, you want to go first and then we'll open up the, go ahead.
Yeah, that's fine. So I think it's very important that we keep an eye. It's a very, very relevant and important question at this stage. While we are transitioning, are we doing it equitably? Are we doing it sustainably? So the cost at which we are building this has got a huge price to be paid. And that is where I think inclusivity comes in. So what I believe is that there's a lot that can be done. You talked about hydro. So we will come to the future in a bit, but pumped hydro, for example, is a very good storage option. It is a closed loop system. It uses power when there is, the power demand is less, and it gives power when the power demand is more. And that kind of innovative solution is what will help us to transition sustainably. Another thing, all of these technologies that we are talking about, they need mining. They need extraction. So the entire extractionism is going to be a question. We shouldn't end up hurting the ecosystem while building a better ecosystem. So the existing ecosystem that needs to be taken care of, there's again a lot that can be done. The mining industry, for example, you can have a tracking mechanism. Like the diamond industry, they found a way to blockchain monitorization of their, to make sure that the undesirable diamonds do not come in the mainstay. So something like that for the current mining processes that this whole technology building is going to need. So those are, I mean, there are many things that can be done, but these are things we should look at, inclusivity and making sure that your supply chains are pure.
I have a different point of view here. Putting, this particular instance of Joshimath, it may not be an outcome of a single activity of a particular project, or harvesting, hydropower project, harvesting hydropower from, a resource available there. The people of Delhi would like to, travel in 100-kilometer speed, even up to Badrinath. It's our expectation which is actually driving these hilly states, not really, taking care of their ecological considerations and kind of, going for 4-lane expansion, rail network into young Himalayan mountains. I think we need to have this a big clarity on what are the development needs of a particular region or a country or a continent. What works for India, what may not work for Africa, what works for US may not work for India. I think we have clearly seen this aspect since we are a policy bank for Government of India. We have seen a lot of projects which we are supporting outside India and in our neighborhood. That's the best resource available, hydropower.
Yes.
In Nepal or Bhutan, they're actually adding a huge amount of revenue to the coffers of the state and also supporting Indian development story.
Okay.
So it's a win-win situation to kind of collaborate on that aspect. But I think we must not let go
your
of
point is that hydro also has a part in the renewable future of India.
Yeah, and no financier, at least the financiers of a good stature, would be going with a blind eye without having a due diligence on the environment and other things, will not be supporting any such project. So if those considerations are kept in mind, I think all these developments are welcome.
Anish, you wanted to come in on this?
Yeah, I think just a small point, Siddharth, thanks. Is basically, I think what has happened in the Western world is hydro and pump storage were always developed as federal assets, right? Because they, as a country, always took a view that that's important for energy security and probably the cost will be much higher than going on a merit order pathway. So those were mostly developed on a federal way. So therefore, from that perspective, I think Government of India should think of coming out with a hydro policy, or HPO is already under task. But I'm saying somewhere Government of India's funds needs to be utilized, looking at all the environmental aspects, of course, taking care of that, but not necessarily equating hydro and pump storage with any other alternative sources, because that's required for our energy security. That's the only.
Yep.
I just wanted to add one thing about, say, this hydro projects and in the eco-fragile zone. I think my professional experience has been that the project assessment technically has not been as robust, and there have been two reasons. One, our knowledge about, say, especially our side of the Himalayas has not been really very great. If you look at all the projects of 25 years, why they basically have suffered cost overrun, not because somebody was, say, adding cost, because when you go and get inside, suddenly you learn geology is something completely different. What it means, we need to now develop perhaps far robust, say, method of assessing the projects and denying some of those projects, right? Today we have technologies fortunately available for that, one. Second, we have experiences from the other projects.
No, but is there a example nearby? Because the Himalayas are in this region, we can't compare it to the Rocky Mountains.
No, yeah.
But what are you therefore saying? Are we kind of lacking in the engineering element in some ways?
In the DPR preparation.
Shilpa?
Yeah, I just want to add to that this is a very important point. We as investors, we as consumers must actually demand that the electricity that we get, or whatever the product that I get today, is being made with environmentally sustainable mechanism throughout. The back-end supply chain also
that's a
needs
good
to be
point.
looked into.
We pay a premium in restaurants for organic food, so maybe we should be prepared to pay a premium for organic electricity. My words, really. Okay. So far, in terms of the future trends, what I have understood here are 2-3 major concerns, and I recap that as we enter the last part of our discussion. One is there is definitely a fix required when it comes to the last mile, which is the distribution mechanism, the ownership of that distribution mechanism, how it is structured, the kind of investment that goes into continuously maintaining and upgrading a world-class distribution network, and there are center state issues. The second thing which after the recent crisis, and I'm glad I asked this question, it helps me get the sense of the panel is that hydro will stay. Again, there are certain things that are required. Let's look at the other things, and again, Sunil, I'll start with you. I first saw a solar cooker in my house where on the first floor in the balcony, potatoes and dal and rice would get boiled, and it used to taste different for some reason. And that was a very nice solar cooker. It was basically a tin contraption with a thick sheet of glass. And then we didn't see that happen. I've also seen some amount of, the internet is full of lots of conspiracy theories, but about how there were electric engines that were used for transport many, many decades ago. That didn't happen because the technology and the adoption and the cost was not mainstream. How far are we from solar being mainstream in India as far as the average retail consumer is concerned? Please leave out the companies that say, okay, our rooftop will be solar, we will have acres of land where we'll put solar panels and do something. That's not for the average person. But when it comes to the average consumer, when will solar become mainstream for them?
Siddharth, what I see is basically what solar cooker you're talking, I think maybe 20-25 years back when we used to discuss about this solar cooker, that and many other items were there which were getting maybe in the kitchen or maybe somewhere as some toys or something like that using the solar panels. That time actually the attraction was the solar, because solar was something new in the industry and people were liking like what exactly new is there. So they want to save, and that's why they were using the solar cooker. So in the past few years we have seen the kind of knowledge people has gained in the solar industry. Even in the normal market scenario also, if you'll see that lot of education, people are getting the education on the solar now. And in the recent, I think if we talk about recently, we can see many even air conditioner also. Nowadays we can see the solar air conditioner also coming. So many new components are coming, but I think it's all about the adoption. Gradually, indirectly, instead of that solar cooker was saving something in form of electricity or something, but now rooftop and all those utility scale of points, they are already providing the power to the consumer. But still anyways, I think there are many other solar products are already coming in the market. So hopefully, I think it will take time, but we are hopeful that a lot of products we can see in the solar segment related to these kind of.
Mr. Roy, that same question to you, try and demystify it, because I don't want an industry to industry conversation. It should be for the average viewer.
Yeah, I think, I understood your question. So whether we will have, say, ACs, cookers, and several, say, appliances which run with electricity running on solar. I think that's going to be difficult for the simple reason that the amount of energy what you need to run those, right? And the amount of area what you need. And then as a consumer at home, you will never like to, okay, now let us really put this thing in under the sun and all. So energy generated by renewable source is going to remain the staple. Perhaps appliances we are going to get more efficient, but unlikely that they will largely move to the solar.
When do you think energy generated from a mix of renewable sources, not just one, will cross the threshold versus conventional sources, which is largely thermal?
Yeah, I think to a really large extent, governments, whether state or federal, they need to invest in, say, the storage technologies. And by no means I am saying battery. It could be pump, it could be, say, your hydrogen, because you need somewhere to store something to supply during 60% of the time. I mean, look at the Germany. So Germany today is kind of so we are consuming approximately, say, 12% of our energy mix coming from renewable sources. Forget about the capacity. Germany has gone up to 49%. But then what happened? Their thermal plants have started getting back down where it was, say, economically not sustainable for them to keep running, right? Then they came up with some technologies and all. But the issue is that the moment you go beyond 40, you need somewhere to store that energy. And storage has a cost.
Okay, on storage, in fact, and if you could expand on that, because that's one part which we have not discussed. Again, demystify storage. For the average person, it is the battery that they use in their car or for some other purposes as well. I'm not even talking about phone batteries.
Siddharth, just before that, on the adoption possibilities and the increase in adoption rate of solar or the green energy possibilities, I think we need to shift a focus a little bit on from the domestic segment to the places where this can work. The solar energy particularly, where the ambient radiation is available for a good part of time and the activities are also aligned with it. And I see agriculture, which is one of the huge consumer of electricity, and it is also kind of, the drag on the discoms, that being a very early adopter in terms of a larger set of population going in for it. Now the Kusum scheme is there. I think it has driven the solar pumps to a good part of India. I think once there are benefits realized by farmers, a word of mouth is sufficient. So I feel there is going to be a huge number of solar pumps replacing the regular electricity connection. And that would also, bring in a lot of semblance of order with respect to electricity tariffs and free bids, tariffs and all. I mean, free electricity and all. The second point, in fact, one of our customer, it's a startup. They have started providing a disaggregated solution or a standalone solution for cold storage, multi-chamber cold storage solution, which can be put in a farm. It's a containerized, solar-powered, and stored coolant kind of a solution, so which works for the farmer. He don't need to invest, crores of rupees. You just need to invest on that one container, maybe in few lakhs, and it works for his produce, which is grown in, say, 2 or 3 acres or 5 acres. So this is where we can see a huge change being, brought in with respect to the agriculture and the adoption by them.
Okay.
Now,
please finish your point and then.
Yeah. On the storage point of, that discussion is very difficult at this point of time for India. We are completely dependent on outside or not so friendly countries. We don't have today a reasonable access to the key ingredients or even the refining technologies as well. I think that's the biggest hurdle we need to cross at this point of time.
That's a very good point, and there was a small bit of news just yesterday about a deposit of a particular mineral that has been found in the state that I hail from. But Shilpa, you wanted to come in, and then we'll let Anish have the final word.
Yeah, I just want to add to the last point, and then we move to the storage. So when we'll see the end user really utilizing solar as an option is where I want to come in. So I believe that unless we give the user an option which is better than the existing option, you cannot really expect a wide adoption. So what you need to do is not just the products, but make a system that is a two-way communication. I'm talking of the grid again. A system where which can communicate both ways, power as well as communication. And that is when and then start the net metering concept, which had started long ago in Germany, led to a wide adoption for the rooftop solar. So in India, if we want to achieve that, then our grids need to be much more sustainable than they are. And the other point, I'll just build on that meanwhile, apply it where it is working, where it will need, which is industry. Industry has a huge opportunity to switch to renewable energy as a source. Wherever, for example, wherever there are heat requirements, generate that heat from renewable instead of fossil.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. I think, just wanted to say that the entire energy transition could be solved if you have energy storage, right? So that's the verdict in that sense. So we all know that energy storage is required because of the various challenges what renewables has. What Government of India's priority and I would say focus is, of course, to promote pump storage because, as rightly said, that we are completely dependent on some other critical minerals which comes from other countries. So that's the way it has gone about. So if you see, almost like 130 new projects have got registered in the last couple of years itself in developing pump storages across the country. So that's a positive development, and the technologies have also now become much more, I would say, advanced in that sense. Earlier pump storages were developed in 5-6 years. Now they're talking about 3-4 years. So yeah, I think the focus around pump storage is the right way till the time we have a permanent solution to go towards battery storage or anything else.
Absolutely, and all of you must have understood virtually hundreds of years, decades of being used to a certain energy supply system, right from the feedstock to how it is metered and billed and paid for, and now a transition which is being driven by private industry along with the pockets of the government that at the state level and of course the center, which is completely focused on this subject. But it's complex, multiple moving pieces, and what industry and ultimately will work for the consumer is a clear set of policies which are not changed and contracts which are honored. I think one of the key things about the future should also, as we end this discussion, is sanctity of contracts in a very, very complex, challenging, capital intensive and technology intensive sector. I'm going to thank my panel for their time and thoughts, and you, the viewer, for staying tuned in. With that, it's a wrap on this session. We'll come back with more. Back to you.
Thank you very much, panelists, for that very engaging conversation. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for the next fireside chat on ushering solar and clean tech growth for Atmanirbhar Bharat, I'm going to be inviting on stage Mr. Karshad Daruwala, who's the chairman of Sterling and Wilson Group. A man of many firsts, Karshad is credited with powering the company's emergence as India's leading mechanical, electrical, and public health engineering and renewable energy solutions provider as well. Karshad has been instrumental in introducing solar EPC way back in 2011, a segment that he believed had great growth potential. And this decision certainly changed the pace of Sterling and Wilson and accelerated the company's growth as well. And to moderate this fire chat, I'd like to invite again Mr. Siddharth Zarabi, Managing Editor, Business Today TV, on stage, please.
Thank you very much. Very warm welcome again. And before we started, I just want to sort of say this, a Parsi and a Kashmiri with surnames that might confuse you, discussing renewable energy and the future of India. So, you know, nothing more that tells you about what a great country we live in. And Khurshid, a warm welcome on this subject. Before I get into some technical questions, the very first that I have in mind, why did you pick this business to be in? You know, I'm sure you would have succeeded in any other sector that you would have tried your hand at.
Yeah, so like some businesses, you tend to fluke. So I think, no, I think really in 2011, if you asked me at that time, 15 crores a megawatt, 15, 18 rupee tariffs, whether it would ever be here, I don't think we forecasted it in that way. We did feel that, yes, I think this is a future business. I think it's better to start early. But no strategy guy at that point of time would have ever felt that we'll be where we are today. So I think that just to put that as a fundamental. But when we saw this industry start moving and the speed at which solar's moved, we saw $2.5. That was the cost per watt, and then it came down all the way to about 20 cents. So it's a phenomenal transition, and I think that for me, I truly believe that the future is just starting. I mean, it's just so much brighter from where we are today. So.
Okay, I'll try and keep this conversation light, but ask you serious questions. Since all of you from the industry keep talking about this price thing, voice is free. Is power going to be free ever in India, even if it's renewable?
Close to free, hopefully 30 years down the line. No. But not.
But how will companies make money?
No, I think everybody's going to make money through the value chain.
Okay.
Today also, I think people right across, from manufacturing to everywhere, we do make money through the value chain. A lot of people have not understood risk. So I think that there's been a large learning curve on what risk to take, who takes
pretty much
it,
all the end
for everyone, right? So, but I think that learning has come through, tough lessons for IPPs, for EPCs, for lenders, etc.
Is the risk and the learning more for sort of smaller companies, innovators, entrepreneurs like you, or is it equally or less for very large corporations which are also in this space now?
See, I think where the risk emanates in this business, at least on the global model, partly in India, if you see most of the projects worldwide, about 80 to 85% is funded by lending institutions. And it is non-recourse when you start the project. So typically they don't want to take any risk at all. So they just want to pass it back down to the EPC. And when you had a time when tariffs fell, or let's say the cost of production fell 80, 90% over 10, 12 years, most people tended not to look at that risk. And then over the last 2 years, I think the module prices jumped up 50, 60%. So then there was a pause that who's going to take this risk? Now the EPC doesn't want to take it.
But the last 2 years is perhaps an aberration and things are sort of settling down?
Yeah, but 2 years of expensive aberrations which actually put a lot of pause in everybody's mind. So like right now in the global model, you're sitting with the bankers. The banker doesn't want to take it. IPP doesn't want to take it. EPC doesn't want to take it. Someone needs to. And things are getting stuck out there. So I think that risk allocation will happen. And at the end of the day, the tariff is just so low that if the tariffs go up a bit, I think the risk can get fairly allocated. So I think that's where the adjustments are happening in the global market right now.
You were listening in intently to the earlier panel where we tried to focus on the future trends. Add your thoughts on what was discussed. Did we miss out on any of the issues that will be part of hopefully a glorious renewable energy future in India?
See, one of the points that was spoken about on financing, I'll just put one perspective to you. The tariffs in Saudi Arabia today are in the range of about 80 paise to 1 rupee. In India, we are at about 2 rupees 30 paise to 2 rupees 60 paise. The capex in India is lower than Saudi. So even if I take into account a little incremental generation which Saudi has compared to India, the capex per unit generated is still lower in India. So basically the entire difference between this 1 rupee to 2 rupee 50 paise is coming on cost of financing. Now in South, means the international projects are able to get 25-year dollar loans at much lower rates of interest. In India is 15% at higher. So at what stage will we be able to be competitive on the financing side? And I know that we've got a 4% hedging cost, etc. So it may not come in that fashion. But I think that is going to determine the cost of solar, renewable power going up in the future.
But Khurshid, just for argument's sake, isn't that cost of financing an issue for all sectors? What is unique just about the renewable sector, because all industry is exposed to forex fluctuations. Those industries which are highly import dependent more so versus others, and cost of financing is high relative. I think India is one of the highest cost capital economies of its size in the world.
Yeah, so there's a big difference on this sector, right? So coal has, there's a price for coal,
yes.
There's a price for gas, there's no price for solar, right? So the entire operating cost in this is going to be finance cost. So the effect of finance cost on the end output is dramatically higher in solar compared to anything else.
Are Indian lenders, have they done enough, or have they been slow on realizing and this opportunity and supporting companies to sort of do this, especially Indian companies to do this?
See, I think that actually the comparison wouldn't be fair. If you're looking at Saudi, UAE, etc., and seeing the tariffs there, they've been pegged to the dollar forever. If you try and peg yourself to the dollar, you'll have other problems. So I'm not getting into the economics of that. But as soon as you don't peg yourself to the dollar and you've got a 4% cost of hedging, you are going to be expensive. Then that is the tariff that we've all got to live with. So I think we'll have to live with higher tariffs than the markets which are dollar denominated.
Okay. Let's talk about one of the things that came up earlier, and this is storage. And I spoke to you before this session also. Explain storage and what are the possibilities and where do we stand currently?
Yeah, so there was a discussion that came up, and I think both people had valid points. There was one view that came up saying that solar is the cheapest form of power, and the other one was that if you wanted 24/7, it's not. And both are right. Okay. Now, I think that for me, the demand that if we are able to generate solar and feed into where is required, it surely will be the cheapest form of power. And there's such a huge potential in all those areas. And just to tap upon, I think all of us see the EV revolution. If the cost of solar generation is 2 rupee 50 paise, if the cost, as was mentioned, is about 1 rupee 20 paise odd for the grid, if you sell solar power to EVs at 4 rupees, because you should be able to monitor it through, instead of charging the normal tariff
But
that
how
you're
would
using.
you be able to do differential pricing?
Why not? Because you got
No, I'm
EV
just asking the technical
so you
question.
got
I'm not
EV
questioning the concept.
Yeah.
Technically,
No,
explain.
you got EV chargers, which are smart chargers.
Right.
They're able to capture nearly anything you want. So
Okay.
the amount of electricity flowing through a EV charger should be captured. If you charge at $4, then the entire argument just goes away of storage, right? Because, like, I'd gone to California, I went to Netflix's office. There were 350 cars plugged into chargers out there. You could charge them at 4 rupees right through. All the offices anyway pay fuel bills free, etc. They'll just give you the electricity free. The cost of, I think, oil imports, etc., going down. Now you can imagine the incentive to the consumer of EVs, and this whole storage concept then goes away of power at night at home because it is being consumed. And just one more industry that will actually hugely benefit. We're already seeing it on the marine side. So there's a company that I know of well, where they've been powering the ferries on the Scandinavian lakes. For the last 3 years, the ferry is just not put on an engine. It's only working on batteries, lithium-ion batteries. And now the companies are actually giving 20-foot containers. So as ships go inland, they'll just, as they come to offload containers, they'll just put on 2 or 3 20-foot containers for it to go to the next stop, pick those containers up, put 2 more. So the entire inland waterway, transportations, etc., can go green very quick. Again, without the expensive cost of battery storage, because now battery storage is propulsion. So I think that these are uses that will open up huge possibilities, but we will need these differential tariffs, we'll need these differential incentives to come in.
We have a, excuse me, a target of 450 gigawatt by 2030 from renewables, and we also have a net zero target by 2070, but that's a long distance off. 2030, 7 years more or less. Is that happening according to you?
Yeah, I think it'll happen. We heard all the challenges, and I think you can look at it in 2 ways, right?
Yep.
So irrespective of all the challenges that we've had till now, we are the 3rd largest every year in solar installations globally. And a lot of these challenges are being worked upon and should go away in the near future. I think if that were to happen, the potential would be huge. Also from a timing perspective, I think it's good for the country, because if we had built over the last 5 years at a much, much larger scale, the entire value chain would have got captured internationally, not within India. I think we've all read and we're seeing that there are huge plans for local manufacturing. The government is supporting it, the private sector is supporting it. So we may just, and if honestly it happens 2 years down the line, I think that should be fine for all of us, because then we should capture the entire value chain within the country rather than it go outside at a competitive rate.
This is a brilliant, excuse me, a brilliant point that's been made. And I'm glad you said this, because we sometimes don't realize as consumers, we want the best, we want it to be cheap, we want it to be 100% reliable. We don't care who manufactures it and what it does. And the way our economy has grown after reforms, for so many years, we haven't thought about self-reliance, Atmanirbharta, when it comes to manufacturing. And I'm glad you picked on that point. Tell me, if we hadn't done that, what would have been the negative pitfalls? What Khurshid has just told us is that we are trying to do the entire value chain, or at least a significant part of it, within the country, and that has meant slower growth than what would have been possible if we had been completely import dependent. And there are countries and suppliers who would have been very happy with that scenario. Khurshid, expand on that point, please.
So see, as a solar EPC, I would have loved to see the market grow in India at a much faster pace. But like I said, that today, we were doing one plant, and I'll give you examples, 500 megawatts, 1000 megawatt solar EPC plants we were doing in Abu Dhabi. The largest capacity that the Indian manufacturer had, single manufacturer at that time, was 500 megawatts. 1000 megawatts. We just couldn't go to him only. Forget the price. Even if he was 10% lower than the international competitor, you couldn't just go and buy from him. He just didn't have the capacity to deliver. I think the Indian market needed protectionism for some time. I'm not a great fan of protectionism, but in an industry which is going to be an industry for the next 20, 30 years, where India is going to play a very large role. I think if you spend 4 or 5 years just creating an environment for the manufacturing sector to to become globally competitive, I don't think it's a big sacrifice. And I don't mind the slow growth over the last 2, 3, 4 years. If in the next 2 years we can capture majority of the, or next 2, 3 years, we can capture majority of the value chain within the country, I think there's a huge opportunity for all of us.
What parts of the value chain do you think we stand a good chance on in terms of making it in India for India and also for exports eventually?
So I think if you see most of the plans declared, I think right now we must be between 15, 20 gigawatts of local manufacturing. And each guy must be, let's say, 1, 2 gigawatts max. Now, individual corporates are looking at 10 gigawatts and 20 gigawatts. First time people are thinking of competing with the Chinese. So I feel that in the next 3, 4 years, and they're going down the value chain. Now, what comes when and how it transpires, I think we'll see as it goes along. But first time, there's hope that 3 years down the line, we will be in situations that you can buy from India, execute for India and for the world. That there was no chance of doing that earlier.
Okay. What policy changes do you think are still required, or not changes, maybe what are the policies that are required to ensure that all of this comes true?
I think as was mentioned by the panel, where we see a difference between the global situation and India, when you're starting a project internationally, you're only starting it after everything is completely ready. Means you're not hoping that, so and here you're starting the projects, the land still being acquired, the transmission you're hoping is in place, etc. So I think those areas, a lot more pre-planning needs to be done, and it needs to be just ready to build. For solar projects, once you're ready to build, then the risks are pretty low on technology. So I think I've seen a lot of data on creation of solar parks by the government, by various private parties. So I think creating the infrastructure to be able to build quickly, I think that's crucial going up in the future. And it will be a bottleneck. We've seen the transmission infrastructure. It will take time to build.
Okay, and that perhaps also ties in with the point that you made. Grow slower, but grow steadily in terms of have all the things in place properly. One more point that again came up earlier, and I want you to explain this to our audience, the rooftop solar possibilities. India is transitioning from urban to, from rural to urban, and most parts of urban India are clusters, high-rises. That's how accommodation is now being built. If you see what's happening, for example, even in smaller towns than just our metros. What's the potential for rooftop solar for our country?
So rooftop, if you see the policy that was done some time back, saying 100 gigawatts, 60 gigawatts utility, and 40 gigawatts on rooftop, right? So the utility is there. The rooftop is far beyond. Means, I think we've reached about 10 gigawatt on the rooftop side. I think the net metering thing started a little slow, but now it's picked up dramatically countrywide. And we will see a lot more rooftop happening as we speak. If there's ever a push to slow down net metering and a person to generate and consume by storage, it'll just slow the whole thing down again. So I think that the cost of storing and using it for your home is just too unattractive at this point of time. Cost of storage will need to come down dramatically, and then I think that combination can
To
work.
what levels, cost of storage, what do you think will make it palatable?
I think the next panel coming will be able to say, but
okay.
But let's say if I had to do solar in the day, it's about 2 rupee 50 paise. If I had to only do solar at night, it'll be maybe $8-9 of storage plus 2 rupee 50 paise of solar. So 11 odd. Then you take day and night, mix it in whatever time period mix you at, and then you'll come to the average tariff.
You touched upon and you gave us a very interesting perspective on the sort of the way we are trying to do it on our own and own and capture most parts of the supply chain. One of the fundamental things that will be, and this had come up in the earlier discussion also, is about a sustainable and uniform supply of raw materials. And while we find it easy to sometimes say, oh, there's so much solar in this country, there are a lot of problems when it comes to many of the raw materials. What can be done to secure ourselves? China has been doing this for decades now. It has long-term contracts all over the world. It has secured massive bulk supplies of pretty much everything that is needed. What can India do in this regard?
I think that's where the large corporates will have to play their part. I'm saying that if you're looking, you're right. If I look at China, I think in 2021, they were doing some 500,000 tons of polysilicon. Next year it was 1.1, next year it was 2.2 million. Now it's about 3-4 million they're talking about. So doubling capacity nearly every year in polysilicon, right? So they've gone ahead. But I'm saying that in our case, if we are going to be building, like I said, a few years down the line, at the scales that are being built globally today. So I think we did about 14 to 16 gigawatts. China did about 87 gigawatts. So there's no reason why we should not do the 40, 50 gigawatts a year. And if it starts 2 years down the line, I think everybody needs to just start seeing how to prepare towards that future.
One of the things that you said, and that stayed with me on a lighter note, when he spoke about Saudi Arabia, the immediate interjection that I wanted to make was, why do they even need to consider that? Peak oil is not in sight, so why? And then he mentioned Abu Dhabi, and then he's given us more examples. Given what is happening, try and explain how people are doing it internationally to the Indian audience when it comes to solar power. You are a leading player there. Why are those countries investing, and how are they doing it differently than us? I'm sure they are doing it in some different way.
So like what Mr. Roy mentioned, that we are at maybe 12%. Until we reach maybe 30, 40%, our grids can take solar power. And so we are still far away from that. All the other countries are even further behind than us. So I think all of us have got a good 5-10 year runway to keep building on that side. So I think that side push you will see all of us, because it is the cheapest source of power for the time it's being used, at the time it's being used. The entire green hydrogen situation, India is looking at becoming a green hydrogen export hub. So is Saudi Arabia, and so are countries which are fortunate to have the sun that we have. So if you take that requirement plus the normal power requirement that you'll have within the country, the solar build is going to be mind-boggling.
Okay.
And just I'll put a number.
Yeah.
I can't disclose who it is, but I know of a particular asset owner who's in Middle East based. Their plans are that they've got about $70 billion of assets today, mainly renewable. They believe by 2030, it will be 300 billion assets. That is the size at which they are seeing the Middle East come up, not only for, and that you can't consume as power. Then you're talking about, instead of exporting oil, you will export green hydrogen, which then can be used in various uses that we've seen. And maybe the entire shipping industry can move towards green hydrogen and ammonia being powered for ships, rather than burning heavy fuel oil, like that. So there's a lot of movement towards that.
Absolutely, and that's a space where several Indian companies have already, I would say, begun, and hopefully we'll see results there. As we wind down this conversation, just a couple of quick points. One is to do with the union budget recently, because we spoke about policy support. Was there anything that you would like to share with us where you felt that this sector has gotten some additional support?
I think majority of the support is come on the manufacturing side. And I think that's the sector that does require the support and the encouragement over the next, like I said, 5 years. So even in the previous budget, the current budget, and it seems to be that will be the focus going up in the future. I think beside that, the industry doesn't really need subsidies. We are able to now do it without subsidy. So, but just the manufacturing, encouragement, ecosystem, protected environment for some time, I think that's where the government should step in and help.
Okay, one final question, and this is to do with the supply chain issues that your sector and practically every other sector faced. COVID meant the breakdown of supply chains, and we saw policy responses driven by other factors. For example, semiconductors, which is not related to our conversation, but we've seen countries, including India, trying to say, listen, the global supply chain may not be the only way. We need self-sufficiency, or at least have some backstop in this regard. Do you feel that the renewable sector also faces certain challenges because of this reversal of globalization, if not a wholesale, but at least in pockets that we have seen?
Yes, so this is bound to, it's already happened. So if you see the three largest markets, so China, US, India, by far on the solar side at least, the largest markets. The US with the IRA, that Inflation Reduction Act, they've been making a huge thrust towards local manufacturing. And a lot is shifting there now. So I think that's happened. India, you can see the same. When we saw this entire dislocation globally, and let's say manufacturing plus one policy globally, it's a reality. I think you can see it across all industries, and especially for an industry like solar, where you can do it locally. It just makes sense for everyone. So most countries are moving towards trying to capture the entire value chain within the country, but then the country needs to have scale. Fortunately, US, us, China have the scale with our local populations, and then that can help you become a global export powerhouse on everything then.
For India, what would be a mix between self-sufficiency and necessary integration with global supply chains and imports thereof?
See, today on the solar side, at least the balance of plant, we believe we are the cheapest in the world when we build in India, even cheaper than what China does. So on the balance of plant side. Then you're talking about importing the modules, where modules and cells today are being manufactured. The cell capacity is very low, that's going up high. And then there are plans for large groups to go right from silicon, sand to silicon, etc. So I think that give it some time, but I think that we will all get there, I think.
Absolutely, we'll all get there, and that's a good point to end this conversation on, because very clearly a lot of work is going on, but many of these things will come together. All the pieces of the puzzle will fall in place as we drive down the road towards a greener and better India. Khurshid, I enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much for your time with us. With that, it's a wrap on this conversation. Sakshi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daruwala, for that insightful and very interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Siddharth. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll now take a very short break. High tea is served. Please join us for high tea before we resume the next leg of discussions. Thank you so much.
Warm welcome once again to everybody here, my panel and all the guests and viewers who are tuning in on the various platforms of Business Today multiverse, including Business Today Television and on Business Today in, as well as Business Today on YouTube and other platforms. My panel here is a very eclectic panel, very well-chosen panel, and I would say we'll be able to get a mix of views in the 45 odd minutes that we have on this discussion today. And since we are talking about future trends, we'll try and keep the focus on the future, and the future is always better. At least that is the mantra that most Indians live by. We look at the future and are able to go beyond the present. I'm going to start with Mr. Ramesh in terms of the subject for our energy transition. Transition is a pretty simple word, but it involves a lot of painstaking detail. Moving out of what is a carbon-fed economy is an imperative for India. It's also backed by the need from a climate point of view, but it's a massive cost. And globally, while the developed nations have been talking about this transition, they haven't really put their money behind where their mouth is as far as helping countries like India achieve this transition in a sustainable and fast manner. But that's the broader picture. What I really want to ask you about is how critical is the role of finance in India's energy transition towards a green, renewable, sustainable future? Mr. Ramesh. Yeah, here you go with the mic.
Thank you, Siddharth.
Just hold it closer.
Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful to see all the ladies and gentlemen, who's who of the industry here. Of course, it all starts with finance. So, I naturally expected this could be the first question for this panel discussion. To give a context, what are the financing, requirement we are looking at for, energy, green energy or clean energy? If we just look at the targets given or undertaken by Government of India is humongous. The kind of energy transition declaration of having 50% of energy requirement by 2030 to be met by non-fossil fuels. So that's about nearly 500 gigawatt of energy to be coming from clean sources of energy. The kind of investment that is going into every kind of value chain in this particular sector is going to be humongous. Now, we have seen this playing out in the last decade, a variety of financing options coming in. Just to start with, the green bonds were the rage for a good part of time. Of course, the traditional debt instruments provided by the financial institutions like us, India Exim Bank, particularly we are in the long-term financing, 10 to 15 years or 20 years also. So that's where the requirement or all the ratios of such a projects work out better. So apart from India Exim Bank, Government of India has also put in place the NAFID, which is another financial institution looking into the infrastructure segment, which is coming into play. And today we saw their bond rising, news also coming into play. Apart from that, all the developmental banks also are coming in this space very aggressively. The African Development Bank, Asian Development Bank, all of them are supporting this particular cause and have been bringing in new structures in place. For a financial institution, we need to first have a clarity on how the price discovery has happened. I think India has demonstrated it in a wonderful manner. I think the whole world is also following that particular model as well. Further, on the offtake risk, again, there is an aggregation of demand and an assurance of payment coming in by the government-led institutions are there,
Right.
which is a great learning for the whole world also. Then there are insurance products which are trying to cover different kinds of risks associated with this sector. I think whatever risk mitigation measures financial institution look forwards, they are all available. Just on an end note, the kind of complexity the project can have. One of the project, one of our major customer who is actually working with this particular program is implementing a project in Australia, which is conceived in UK, funded by Korean entities, put out in Western Australia, and supported by an Indian financial institution. So this is the global situation what we are looking at.
Right, absolutely. And the risks are unique, and we can talk about that. Since we have a mix on the panel, what I want to do is I want to get the industry view first, and I'll go to Sunil at the extreme left of the panel to sort of Sunil, the question about the transition. A lot of people only focus on the Ambani, Adani, the Jindals and all the big companies which sort of get more mind space and media share sometimes. But a lot of innovation is happening in other companies that may not be that well known or marketed. Purely from the transition that is being done by Indian companies and Indian jugaad, if I may use that word, what could you share with our audience?
So as you mentioned rightly that innovation, what has happened and the way how we have reached what we were doing 5 to 6 years back, the kind of tariff which was there in the renewable industry was even, it was more than 10 rupees. That was the tariff. And the innovation which has happened in the industry, the kind of companies which has come in these last 5 to 6 years has been able to give some innovative product to the industry. And that is the reason why today we are sitting at the tariff. I think the lowest tariff which went in India was around 1.99. So you can see starting from 15 rupees or 18 rupees, now it has touched that 1.99 also. And all this has been possible because of the continuous innovation which is happening in the industry. So as I am from the, basically from the one of the supplier of the project solar plants which is happening is major, the component is the inverter part. So I'm basically representing that company. So lot of innovation is happening in the inverters and even in the module segment also, which is actually creating the kind of advantages which developer or EPCs can get out of it. And the reason they are optimizing their cost, the project cost they are optimizing. And based on that, I think the outcome is in front of everyone, that kind of tariff which has been invented in the industry. So this kind of things if continuously happening, so I think maybe like in industry which we have seen even in the Middle East, the tariff is even far lower than what we are operating in India. So maybe we'll see soon the days when we are maybe operating the tariff which is even lower than 1.99.
Since Sunil has spoken about tariffs, I don't know how many of you here would recall that the curve on tariffs, at least, that industry is talking about here. And before we started this panel, this was also being discussed with other people. It mirrors what happened in telecom in India. And 18 rupees was one of the earlier call rates, and you know what has happened. It's not strictly comparable, but the point is that India is such a large market that for the first few years or maybe even a decade and a half, companies, regulation, policy makers will struggle at arriving at an optimal fit. And because we are a resource dependent nation, many parts of this renewable energy industry chain, we are still dependent on overseas. Therefore, the risk and the execution challenges multiply. Mr. Roy, I'm coming to you on the point. Maybe you could explain this from your industry and the segment that you operate in, really. How significant has this transition been in India if you were to compare it globally? In many sectors, we have moved far ahead of other countries. Fintech is just one example. So using that sort of outsider's perspective, I'm asking you to explain to the lay audience here, how much have we achieved and how far is still that we need to walk on.
Thanks. So if you ask me that to what extent we have really transitioned, I think we are still, say, scratching the surface, except in one area that we have been the world leader in achieving the sustainable tariff and perhaps the lowest in the world, I will say, other than, say, the Gulf region where you have sun god really shining.
But is lowest sustainable from an operator's point of view?
Yeah, sustainable for everyone. And I'll explain that why.
Okay, yeah, please do. Please.
Yeah. But if you ask me that whether we have really gone through the transition mode, perhaps still not. And I'll tell you the reason. The biggest reason is that, see, the renewable is an energy which will flow to the user in form of electron through electricity boards. Now, till the time you have a commercial entity which decides what is to be supplied and how much to be supplied, all your effort finally gets bottlenecked at that point in time. I'll just touch upon one point on finance. I can tell you one thing. There is hordes of money which is actually waiting in the pipeline to be invested in India in Indian IPPs. You are not getting them because what do they say? Oh, you do the, say, bidding in, say, 2019. We are still waiting for PPAs to be signed in 2020 end. We still have, say, in 21, I do not know whether in 21 or 22 I will be able to start the project. Why? Who decides that that project will come up finally? It is the electricity boards. So till the time you really bring the commercial entities there, we will struggle in terms of transition.
I want to interject here since you speak about the reform of our power distribution, and by default, therefore, it really means reforming and changing the extent of state control on our distribution boards and the associated political issues. Are you therefore saying that we should not be hopeful? Because it's not happened really for the last 25 years that I have seen this subject.
Correct. And unfortunately, we still are not moving in that direction, as much I can tell you.
Okay.
Right?
So one of the future trends, Mr. Roy, since we're on that subject, what would you therefore say needs to be done to ensure that our transition is quick and long-term sort of good for everyone?
Yeah, and that's unfortunately is say into the constitutional quagmire, if I can say, because if electricity is in, say, your state subject or concurrent subject, it is only as much where the federal government can do. You have states.
So are you saying that states are not on board with the center?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Why would that be? Because I find it perplexing. The states are who actually cater to their voters, to their masses. Why wouldn't they want to adopt newer things and do that in a sustainable manner?
It's very simple that whether you have the courage to sustain through the period when the transition really happens. Because nobody is going to like you during the transition. I'll just give you one example. So we sell power to SECI, right? And we sell power to Juvenile.
Refreshing and recharged after, feeling recharged after the high tea as well. It's time now to resume the next leg of panel discussions and fireside chats. May I please request everybody to settle down now? Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for the next panel discussion, which will be on round-the-clock renewable energy, the next frontier. And for this, I'm going to be inviting key speakers onto the stage now. Mr. Amit Jain, Country Manager, NG India and COO, Renewables, AMEA, joins us on the stage. Dr. Rahul Walawalkar, President and MD, CES India and President, India Energy Storage Alliance, IESA. Also on the stage, please. Mr. Kapil Maheshwari, President, New Energy, Reliance Industries Limited. May I please have you on stage? Mr. Anish Dey, Global Head, Energy, Natural Resources and Chemical, ENRC, KPMG India. May I please invite you on stage as well? And also joining us will be Mr. Rajneesh Rothria, CTO, Sterling and Wilson, Renewable Energy Limited. And to moderate this panel, I will be moderating this panel, Associate Editor and Anchor, Business Today TV. Good evening once again, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the biggest challenge in the global movement to 100% renewables today is how we balance supply and demand. And that is the mood challenge, really, at this point in time, how to ensure a stable, sustainable, equitable distribution of renewable energy at all hours of the year without the support of fossil fuels and also nuclear support. So let me kickstart this discussion with you, Amit, and understand from you, right at the beginning, is 100% renewable energy ecosystem even imaginable at a stage where all our panelists so far through this time have just talked about how we've just been able to manage to scratch the surface as of now?
Thanks, Sakshi. I think, renewable power, round-the-clock power, that's the topic, right? I think India, we've bid out some round-the-clock tenders, but it's not round-the-clock 100%, right? It's PLF of 80%, which says, okay, it can be oversized. It's not actually giving us power 24/7, which is the term that we use globally, which means that every kilowatt hour, every hour is a renewable power, right? So I think we're far away from that indeed. I think currently the round-the-clock power that's being bid out, it's more oversized capacities. Storage, of course, as we heard from other panelists, it's still not competitive to meet the tariff demands of the discoms. So I think there is a long way to go. There are ways like, if we see other markets, for instance, we recently at NG signed a contract with Google about a couple of years ago, in fact, where we provide them 24/7 power for every kilowatt hour that we supply to them, right? And this basically means that, we're using solar, wind, the merchant markets, which really needs to evolve in the Indian context before we can reach that stage.
Rahul, if I may ask you to add to this, what are the 3 key challenges that you see at this current stage that we need to mitigate before we reach that 100% renewable energy space?
Thank you, Sakshi. I think the biggest challenge is inertia. I think we like to just get together and talk about this and just wait for some magic to happen where the cost will come down. I think we have seen it in every industry, solar being the classic example where we started deploying solar when it was 17 rupees, and we have seen now solar reaching under 2 rupees. With storage, we are seeing the same trend happening around the globe. At the cell level, the costs have come down more than 95% in last 15 years, where around the world we are seeing a lot of projects. Unfortunately, in India, we have been just saying that, no, it is not economical. We want to wait. We want to wait for manufacturing to happen. Yeah. And without doing the demand side activities, manufacturing is not going to happen. So that's where the biggest challenge is. But the good news is that finally, with last 5 years of effort of India Energy Storage Alliance and Niti Aayog, we have now 50 gigawatt hour manufacturing being set up in India. And in fact, with the kind of interest which is being generated, we have now already set a vision for setting up 500 gigawatt hour manufacturing for advanced energy storage in India. And we will get there. This year, we are expecting more than 15 tenders, which are almost at few hundred to few gigawatt hour scale, including energy storage, we are all going to come out. And I think finally we are reaching a stage where we are going to go beyond the discussion and start implementing. The biggest learning which I would say is that as a CS, we manage more than 2 gigawatt hour of energy storage in North America as part of a 18 gigawatt portfolio. And there are a lot of optimization which you can do when you are actually operating and managing the asset. It is not going to happen just because of the capex reduction. And unless we start deploying projects, starts learning from it, we will not be able to capture that.
Right. Thank you for that take, Rahul. Mr. Maheshwari, if I could take that point forward with you. The key challenges right now that we face to transition completely to renewable space, and what are private players such as yours really contributing in a fast transition or a faster transition to that goal now?
So thanks, Shakshi. So I'll address your first point first. Second point, that how are private players doing? So private players who are large consumers of energy have at the same time very good decarbonization goals. And one of the energy transition is seen as topmost priority in every board meeting now. So if that is the kind of attention it is seeking, everybody is doing that. So the 10-year shift which we have seen in adoption of renewable is now happening, how we can get this 24/7. So that shift needs to start. And for that to start, possibly your first question was on the challenges. Yeah. First, you need to address the price points. So, and to address price points, we really need to figure out is electrochemical or the battery storage the only thing? Can we look at other forms of storage as well? Because while some of the things can work for some geographies, the same things may not work for a different kind of in geography or a need. So your idea should be always that how do you match your demand and supply? And once you start doing that, you will definitely be able to figure out what solution works best.
Yeah.
And especially for private clients, we would definitely look that for a particular factory at a particular location or in kind of an industry, what solution works best in order to minimize cost. And the next challenge, what you say is technically the adoption. We really need to see that let's not talk about 100% RERTC. Let's see where do we hit 60%. Let's see where do we hit 80%. Because of course there's a limitation to which you would reach 100% RERTC. Let's take the first step forward. I think we'll be able to reach what we are all talking of, 100% round-the-clock renewable power as well. And for that to happen, an ecosystem needs to be built, and private players are definitely playing their role along with the government, which is coming out with the supportive policies.
Sure.
So private players have participated in PLI, and government has announced a viability gap funding for battery energy storage. So all of this putting in place, I think there are ways to overcome those challenges.
Right. We will speak to you more about, quantifying the kind of moves that you're taking as a private player yourself in the company. But Anish, let me just come to you for your opening thoughts as well. India right now is facing a quadrilemma, when we talk about renewable energy space, the energy access security, and then there's the affordability factor, which Mr. Maheshwari just pointed out. And then there is the sustainable provision as well. How can we, or how soon can we, mitigate all these challenges?
I mean, what's a specific point you want to talk about? Just can you elaborate on that question? What is
So basically, India is facing a quadrilemma right now.
Yeah.
We do have a challenge of security, we do have a challenge of energy access, we do have a challenge of affordability, and then a sustainable provision. So how do we really go forward? What is the pecking order we need to really go forward with to tackling each of these?
Fair point. So you see, we have to remember India's context, and it's the context is of a growth economy which is going to be continuing on a growth path for the next 20-25 years, and it's very different from the rest of the world, including from China. And at the same time, we have to decarbonize. So this is the challenge which we have, which is very different from, as I said, from the rest of the world. So if you are looking to do that, you have to draw some red lines around. And one of the first red lines to draw is that we are not going to live with energy poverty. That is a definitive red line. So subject to that, we can look at all kinds of solutions which are possible. And if I had to look at what is the way to go about it, within those red lines, I think you have to take a portfolio view. And rather than getting fixated about RTC power or whatever, you have to see what is the least cost portfolio which operates within those red lines and then delivers you the decarbonization. My summary point would be that is possible. And it is possible to get a lot of renewable energy. It's possible to get a lot of storage if you have the will, as Rahul mentioned. It is possible to get in markets. It's possible to get in transmission. It is possible to integrate all of that and deliver that low carbon, least cost power if you plan it and execute it the right way. It's a lot of hard work, but very much possible within those red lines.
Right. Rajneesh, if you could add to that as well and help us understand how a private player such as yours is going to be contributing in mitigating such challenges and achieving that 100% renewable space. What are you doing at Sterling and Wilson Group as well?
Yeah, thanks, Sakshi, and good evening all. Yeah, so I will add to the points to the challenges when, why the challenges started. See, the promotion of the renewable energy, wind and solar has reached to some extent that it was dominating the grid. And the grid was facing particularly the load dispatch centers and the state dispatch centers for the fluctuation of the power demand. At the moment when they are getting a peak power from the industries and all, and the radiation and the wind is not in control of anybody, it's nature. So to meet that challenge, a storage device or something about the RTC word has come, and thanks to the government policies also, which now they are saying that 15% has to be there as a RPO, has to be increased to 40 plus, and there will be some the penalties also if they will be not doing. So that all will support to conquer and understand the balance of the challenges. Challenges will always be there. It was there during wind era.
Yeah.
It was there during the starting of the solar when we were in 2010. Like the, technological involvement is still happening in the solar.
Yeah.
And, the changing of the module sizes, changing of the inverter. So, and it is happening in a different time space. When the module suppliers are changing something, the other ecosystem is not ready. And to meet that ecosystem, the time and the benefit which we should get at the right moment is not there. So all these balances are required to be there. And as a EPC player, as you asked correctly, which was touched between the last panel's discussion also, the learning which we are having globally from all the projects is percolated constantly and continuously to our developers, our vendors specifically, that what exactly we want, what exactly the system and industry wants, which will be, reducing these gaps between the time-space technologies.
Okay. Amit, how did you look at the announcements in the budget 2023 in terms of providing enough to the renewable energy ecosystem? Is enough being done at the center level, at the state level, or much more needs to be done now?
I think in the budget, indeed, I think there was a thrust for renewables. I think the finance minister did mention on the renewable side that it's a thrust area, especially linked to hydrogen. But I think beyond that, there are a lot of policy matters that are being undertaken by the government, right? I think the government, as was said, that the RPO obligation for each state is being made mandatory. Financial support to the DISCOMs have been provided. The transmission infrastructure is being improved. All the bottlenecks that are there, I think the government is addressing that. It's aware of the bottlenecks, is addressing that indeed. So I think it's the move in the right direction. I think with now corporates also moving towards that. I think merchant markets also being more buoyant. I think we can definitely push this through in the future. Huh?
Okay. Rahul, storage has emerged so many times throughout the course of discussions. Perhaps it's a major concern right there. From your own sector, what is the bigger ask right now, if not achieved as of yet from the government side?
So on storage side, we are very happy, especially if you talk about budget. Many of the industry requests have been accepted by the finance ministry. One was the viability gap funding for 4 gigawatt hour of storage, which would help many of these projects I talked about, which are coming up this year. There was also immediate reduction for import duties for cells, which can be used for possibly both batteries as well as electric vehicles. There is one more thing, which is, I think, rationalization of GST, which is a big pending ask, because many times we keep on talking about, we want cost of storage to reduce by 30%. But right now, actually, if you are doing a brand new BSS project, you are ultimately paying almost 40 to 43% in duties and taxes.
Yeah.
So that's something which, especially for next 2 years, 3 years, if we can provide some relief on that, that will achieve the immediate reduction, and the demand will support manufacturing, because we are going to see a lot of manufacturing being set up, and most of the manufacturing facility which is happening in terms of gigafactories will be able to serve both stationary as well as e-mobility. But right now the demand generation on e-mobility is happening at much faster pace. That's where maybe the expectation is in the first set of gigafactories will be mainly catering to the e-mobility sector. So now we are also expecting Ministry of Power to release a follow-on PLI where there is a focus on stationary energy storage.
Well, we will hear from the minister very shortly on that, and you can ask that question directly to him too. But Kapil, to you, I wanted to understand anything more that you require from the policy side, from the government side at this point in time to ensure a faster, sustainable transition?
See, I believe when things needs to happen, the marketplace will play its role. You always cannot go back to the government in terms of asking for too many things.
Yeah.
Because they also have their own limitation. The only thing what I feel, we have been taking steps, and steps are all in the forward direction, is, possibly the certainty on policies. So, let's not have a goalpost which is sometime moving back and forth. If that also can happen, possibly, that will give a greater confidence to investors that even if I'm, possibly, because these are capital intensive projects.
Yeah.
So even if I'm making lower returns, these are certain returns. And not going to reduce even further as time passes.
Okay, so PLI or any other incentives that you'll be looking at from the
So,
government
we
side?
have participated as Reliance in both the PLIs, which the government has announced, and possibly the second phase of solar PLI, which is coming also. So, we won the PLI for ACC PLI, battery storage as well as in the solar. So, yes, that's a step which is in the positive direction.
Right. Kapil, Anish, if I can come to you, that, fiscal policy or political support, what is the need of the hour right now if we want to ensure this transition?
Actually, more the political support. And of course, you need both. And as Rahul mentioned, there is a lot of disconnects in fiscal policy, which we see happening all the time. And then there's no consistency necessarily. It's also not aligned to the growth requirement of the industry. So if we are looking at doing 40 gigawatt and instead doing 14 gigawatt, that gap has to be bridged by fiscal policy, not just the PLI kind, but actually consistent policies on BCD, on the the other duties which Rahul mentioned on GST. There's such a big disconnect between various components. So I think there is a little bit of hard work. So I mean, while it's usual to speak good about the things which are done, and we should, but I think there is a lot to be done as well. But the bigger worry which I have is on the political support at the state level rather than at the national level. Now, it's not that the states don't support it. You speak to them individually, they support it. But what happens is that their priorities become very different. They are not always well funded to let go of a lot of things. So the wheeling, banking, everything costs them money. Okay, and the moment the renewables become more and more, it is going to cost them more money. So if you have to bring them along, you have to give them the carrot as well for that, which I didn't see enough of, and you have to carry them along. You have to have that dialogue, which I would like to see a lot more of.
Okay. Rajneesh, what about you? GST, PLI, anything else that is on top of your radar when you would want to ask for policy intervention from the government even now?
Yeah, from the policy perspective, the manufacturing is one thing which is talked about, the in-house and IGBT and all this semiconductor was discussed. In the same way, the manufacturing of the components in India and mostly the right mix of the RTC when there are tenders and there are things which is mostly is very vague on account of that what should be the mix of the technologies from the RTC perspective. Yeah. So the best possible optimized cost to the power which is the average power of the RTC was discussed in the one of the session will come when we will be doing, there are softwares and there are things which is worked upon, that what percentage of solar, what percentage of wind, what percentage of hydro, and without thermal none of the renewables can work. That is a fact. So, and this was also talked about that if you will be investing all these combinations and thermal will be reaching to such a point that it will be not viable and the thermal power plant owners will say, no, we are not interested to support. And at that moment of time, these policies are required to be made that what right mix of the technology is needed. And then only the developers and the EPC contractors will work upon to meet and this will be the path forward for meeting the cost objectives.
Right, absolutely. Anish, I wanted to understand from you, you must have done some studies independently as well. When we talk about, 100% goal of renewable energy, round the clock renewable energy going forward from here, 2070 as the net zero target as well. I was reading somewhere there's a $90 trillion kind of an investment globally that we will have to incur. That is currently the size of the global GDP as well. So, where is the money going to come from and how the financing is going to really take place for all of that?
See, I mean, it might be the global GDP, but that money will come over a period of time. And our experience has been that you find the money when the money finds a way to come back to the investor. So there is not such a big challenge in my assessment. The issue is that whether it's going to get the right returns, it's going to get the right risk coverage, and then you will see that money come in. But I do want to make a comment on, because your theme is around 100% RE, and also you started the question with that. To me, it's a little bit of a false goal.
Yeah.
It's a wrong motto. It's a wrong goal to start. What you want is rapid decarbonization, and that RE is a means to that. It need not be 100% RE. It sets things wrong way and increases the costs. you could well be happy with 80% and look at the other means of decarbonizing to reduce the cost faster. So while it was okay to start with 100% RE as the slogan, I think we need to get off slogans and get to actual practical realities of what delivers decarbonization at the least cost, including the least capex. The money can be found.
Okay. Yeah, Rahul.
So I completely agree with Anish. I think we could have done, like, for example, with renewables, we did not start straight away with the 100 gigawatt goal, right? We started initially with a national mission with 20 gigawatt goal, and we provided a clear roadmap to the industry, which gave industry confidence to invest in capacities and capabilities. Same thing is required with even trying to make renewables more dispatchable. I think before we get to 100% RE, we need to start looking at how we can improve the flexibility of renewables, and their energy storage should have been actually playing a role for last 5 years. We have lots of wasted opportunities where we could have started with just maybe 10% of the energy which is being generated by renewables stored, and that could have helped in deviation settlement mechanism and many of the other things. But instead of that, we have been waiting about, every time we talk about, oh, if you store solar, then it goes to 10 rupees or 11 rupees.
Yeah.
But that's not the requirement. If you are storing 10%, then maybe the incremental cost is going to be 50 paise.
Yeah.
Now, when we are already seeing different tenders going from 2 rupees to 3 rupees, is 50 paise adder which cannot be absorbed. And as the deployment starts happening, as we start optimizing these assets more, we can keep on going 20, 25, 50% very easily. And that itself will help a lot, because we do not have a demand which is a completely flat 24/7, right? So there is a demand flexibility. We need to not only be talking about solutions on the generation side, we need to allow demand response or similar market mechanisms, where actually in India, we have huge amount of storage already deployed on the customer side. We can actually enable that to come into it. Khurshid talked about electric vehicles.
Yes.
Electric vehicles itself, those are batteries on wheels, right? So we have huge amount of storage which is coming in. We need to make sure that the charging infrastructure which is getting built is bi-directional, so that maybe some of those storage which is on wheels can also start playing a supporting role. So a lot of innovation can be done. We don't need to keep on just waiting, but start acting.
Sure. Amit, if you could come on that as well, you know, how the green energy solutions are really, looking at supply side interventions, at the same time driving the demand for clean energy at this point.
Just to pick on Rahul's point, right? I think, the storage in India that we is looking at is only basically for peak shifting, right? But globally, we see other business models for storage to make storage viable, right? I mean, we see, negative pricing on grid support and voltage support. That makes storage affordable, even with the current prices of batteries that we have in the market, right? So so these are the models, interventions that will happen. Of course, there has to be adoption. There has to be, the drive to invest. I think money, coming back to your question, the money is out there. I think we are looking at India to invest in India as a market for us, one of the 30 countries that we invest in. So I think from that perspective, the money is out there. I think it's about protecting returns, as was said. I think there are several interventions or initiatives that the government is taking, any which ways to do that. I think, if we can support that, if we can have policies that support the return protection of the investor, then there's money to be invested indeed.
Okay. Kapil, if I could ask you also, especially, do you believe that the supply chain weaknesses across renewables are posing as a big barrier to energy transition that we are talking about? And also, what will be the role of private sector, such as yours, in removing some of those hurdles now?
I'll take on first from what Anish said. We also need to understand, we have been talking just on the electricity side of it.
Yeah.
Now, in the whole energy transition, electricity is only 30 to 35% of the transition.
Okay.
So so let's look at, instead of calling it more round the clock always, let's look at it, what dispatchable power you can move from one end to the other end.
Okay.
So we really need to devise our projects and policies in accordance with that. Coming to your question on the supply chain side of it, you have seen an immense response on both the PLIs, where government has asked a good amount of local value addition. Let me take an example of the solar PLI. So there were players who bidded for the entire value chain, which is from sand silica to ingot wafer, cell and module, whereas presently the country is only at cell and module. If you look at even the ACC PLI, which is the advanced chemistry cells, the participation was almost double the kind of size which was allotted. So for a 50 gigawatt hour, it was 108 gigawatt hours for which the bids were coming. And with the kind of attention it was giving it to the energy density, number of cycles, and the local value addition. So if everything is falling in place, it will take its own time.
Yeah.
We will face hurdles like, with geopolitical conditions like export ban happening on plant and machinery from certain countries. So while it poses challenges, it also gives an opportunity that can we develop these things on our own? It will take time.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. Even others have taken time. So why are we in such a hurry that we want to do this thing as on today? But I think we have all the capabilities present in India, be it financing, be it talent, be it engineering, and be it the materials to do all that.
Okay.
And the willpower as well.
Sure. So I think Anish also wanted to say something, and Rahul also. So Rahul, do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So in terms of the supply chain, one thing again, we get many times fixated with just India manufacturing, right? One thing which is happening is what COVID has taught everyone in the world is you cannot rely on a single source for supply chain. And right now we are looking at, I'll talk specifics about the, say, battery manufacturing. The global battery manufacturing is right now around 1,000 gigawatt hour annual production, of which 85% is captured by China. But if you look at next 10 years, it is expected that somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 gigawatt hour of new cell manufacturing capacity is going to come in, and it is not going to come in only in China.
Yeah.
Almost half of that is going to come in outside China, and most of these countries are looking for a reliable partner in addition to China. So again, I don't want anyone to expect that suddenly all these countries are going to move away from China. I think China has done tremendous work, and we need to respect that, and we cannot get away from that. But as India, as the India Energy Storage Alliance, last month we have set a vision where we are saying that by 2030, can we aim at being 10% supplier for the global advanced battery
Realistic
manufacturing,
goals.
and by 2035, 20%.
Sure.
That would create opportunity for almost 2,000 gigawatt hour worth of supply chain globally to be served from India.
Sure.
And I think that's an opportunity we can capture.
Sure, absolutely. Anish, I mean, like you were sort of disagreeing with what Kapil was saying, perhaps. Just clarify if that is the thing.
Disagreeing.
Okay, but I wanted to ask you, of course, how you can make that point after his discussion, but I wanted to ask you that, we usually say that supply chains are only as strong as the weakest links. So we rely on imports. We also rely on the growing need for the skillful workers as well, and the domestic manufacturing capacities, which are untapped so far. But can all of this really make clean energy industry really vulnerable to, say, production shortages going forward from here, to trade disruptions, and even natural disasters?
See, that's not the only thing which will disrupt this industry. This industry will disrupt itself. So hydrogen in one form will disrupt hydrogen in another form.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to be ready for that disruption. And I think that's something which we need to recognize. I see this question in a very conventional lens. It's coming from a very conventional lens. But if I look at the innovation ecosystem which is playing out now in the last 3 years and during the COVID period, you went into COVID with certain knowledge, you came out of COVID and you see what's happening. It's a very, very different thing. So I would not be excessively worried about traditional supply chains. I would be more worried about seeing that we keep the innovation going.
Yeah.
There's a youth of the country who are doing fantastic work, and they will solve some of those supply chain problems also.
Right. Rajneesh, what are companies such as yours doing in R&D, in innovations, technological development, exploring the trade, collaboration, to really have an integrated renewable energy generation, storage, distribution, all of that?
Yeah, so I will take the points from Kapil and then Anish. So basically, we are regularly, mitigating the supply chain challenges to meet the deadlines of the project and the commissioning, the time which is agreed. So basically, not only, if we talk about battery, which is a very nascent stage at the moment, but all the renewables will require the support system of BOS. And BOS components, whether it is a transformer or cable or, other, steel structures, supports or civil engineering, all this is a conversion of raw materials of steel, copper, aluminum, and, cement industries and all. So converting all for generating a renewable energy, this supply chain should not be on such a pressure to meet all this demand. Shilpa already touched that the mining should not be in such a way being done, which will be, again creating a green power into a different perspective.
Okay.
So this balance, is required. I respect all the opinion from the panel members that this capability is there.
Yeah.
Definitely, we can develop, we can manufacture, but
Okay.
keeping all this in mind.
Okay, some panelists are realistic targets and some of them are absolutely ambitious and believe in the India's capacity to really mitigate the challenges right here. But Amit, let me just ask you on the cost point, which has also been discussed before on the panel, but it is important to touch upon that as well. It is one thing to say that, we are going to be achieving the net zero goals, but we do know that India is and businesses also are price sensitive at this point in time. When we talk about round the clock renewable energy as well, will it eventually become price competitive to the grid?
Again, I think what we're seeing globally, right? I mean, the RE100s, I mean, everybody is going for 24/7, have some form of target for 24/7 renewables in the near future. That's set apart. I mean, price is one side, right? I mean, they're willing to pay a premium. That's what we see in different geographies, that they're willing to pay a premium to get that 24/7 target achieved, right? So I think that's what I said. I mean, the merchant market needs to drive this 24/7 kind of story. The utility or the industry, as was said, I mean, I think it's very difficult to say that India will go 24/7 renewables because, as was said, it is a developing country. I mean, we are not going to be, we need base load, and I think any technology that we have today, at least, does not provide that. So
Absolutely.
I think the drive would come from the merchant market. I think the likes of, all the big tech companies, everybody, all the RE100s have some kind of targets for renewables.
Kapil, if you can comment to that as well. What is really needed to make renewable energy price competitive with the grid going forward from here?
Nothing needed. Renewable energy is already price competitive.
It is?
Yes, it is.
We know that solar and wind is, but round the clock.
So from an round the clock perspective also, I would say what is required is let's not go in this whole dilemma of every time dollar per kilowatt hour for in battery cost. Let's look at how we can keep enhancing, because we are talking of stationary storage here, how we can keep enhancing different technologies which can play a role in terms of storage. It could be, somewhere it is the PSP which works, somewhere it is the air compression also which can work. So we can look at what long duration energy storage can make it for in dispatchable power. Batteries or the electrochemical technologies will play a key role. At the same time, can we look at chemistries which are outside our reach and bring down the cost for them so that we can start commercial scale manufacturing for that? I think industries have already started taking initial steps towards that. Just an example, Reliance invested in a company, Faradian, which is sodium ion. So, taking into account that lithium reserves are not in India, what do we do if, so that's not gonna, come so suddenly. But at the same time, I would say possibly if we combine, so there is no silver bullet which comes that this
on
one
that,
technology
I want to
works.
ask you, Kapil, we did see the news flashes right this morning, 10 gigawatts being set up by Reliance Industries in UP, 75,000 crores really flowing in as investments over the next 4 years. How much of that will actually go into making renewable energy affordable for the common man out there?
So, if you talk of all the announcements, possibly, I wouldn't say only for Reliance, but all possible large conglomerates and the IPPs, the amount of power which everybody has announced and the amount of investments in the whole green sector, even if a portion of that happens, it is certainly going to help even the end consumer. Not only industries, but end consumer as well, because technically, if we keep on adding more renewable to the grid, even the distribution licensees would take that green power and then supply it to the end consumer. There is a possibility some of them themselves become an distribution licensees in the country and then start supplying that. And then there's a whole market of energy as a service. But it cannot just contain what we are seeing, that RE100 industrial players would continue to drive the market. The end consumer needs to see the benefit and would see that.
Okay, Rahul, you wanted to make a point there?
Yeah, in terms of the price competitiveness, I think many times we get fixated with these large tender prices and try to just compare that, right? If
Does
you
it
see
all boil down
commercial,
to storage capacities and innovations in that?
yeah, no, I'm saying that in terms of the commercial industrial customers, if you see, as Kapil mentioned, it is already cost effective. There is no commercial industrial customer who is paying a tariff less than 8 rupees.
Anish disagrees.
In terms of
Okay. Yeah. Oh, every time you nod your head, I feel that it is a disagreement. Okay.
Yeah. So most of the commercial industrial customers are paying tariff which is within 8 rupees to 12 rupees.
Yeah.
You can get significant amount of flexible RE, including storage, for somewhere between 6 to 7 rupees per kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
So what is been required is to get the technologies available on ground, look at other solutions such as the business side of solution like financing and other thing like Kapil talked about energy as a service, and that's what has been stopping. It is not a innovation on the manufacturing level or in a lab scale. Those things will happen, those things will come up. We don't know in next 10 years, 20 years which technology is going to dominate. Already in last 15 years of working in energy storage, I've seen more than 20 different technologies being tried to get commercialized, and many of those will continue in future as well. But we need to, again, to your other point in terms of this, all this import and other thing, I just get fascinated why we are suddenly worried about importing some of the renewable energy technology components or batteries and supply chain for that. We are talking about replacing reliance on fossil fuels, including petroleum, and we are importing 80 to 90% of the petroleum for last century.
That's true.
And we are replacing that. So if we can live with that, if we can live with price stocks where oil prices have gone from $5, $20 to above $100, and industry has survived, same thing will happen. We don't need to overreact to some of the short-term price changes which happen with some of the new technologies.
Yeah.
The trend is very solid. It is going to continue because it is not dependent on commodities. It is based on improvement in performance, improvement in overall efficiencies of the technologies, and that trend is going to continue.
Okay, Anish, I want you to come in on that. And
First is
also,
that I have to be
what Shilpa was
careful about
mentioning
how
in
I
the
shake my
previous
head.
panel, she clearly said one thing, that till the time you give something better, nobody's going to be adopting what there is. In terms of pricing and the other factors as well, if you could come on to that.
See, yeah. So I think, you asked about whether I was disagreeing. I was agreeing with him. And as I said, I need to control the shake of my head to convey the right message. But if I disagree with something in all of this, I actually disagree with a very rigid definition of the RE100 theme. That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I just want to emphasize that because we are coming back to that question. See, it's an integrated grid. You don't put in an electron at some place and take away the same electron at another place. It's not a truck taking material from one place to another. Okay. So if it's an integrated grid, what we need to do is, for any player, find the lowest carbon way of meeting demand. And that could be 100% low carbon, but it doesn't need to be from source to sink.
Yeah.
We have a pure definition of the electricity which flows there. Okay, it could be from energy markets, it could be from renewable energy certificates, it could be from GDAM, GTAM, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of innovation which is happening. So I do want this audience to think about very deep penetration of renewables, because that's the only way to go forward on the supply side. We are not going to build coal-fired power plants anymore. That's not practically possible. It's not financeable.
Correct.
Okay, so we will build more of renewables. We need to go to 40 gigawatts without a question. But when we use that renewable, we need to use it much more inventively, much more differently than the way we are conceiving some of these solutions today. If we do that, then we do get to a very affordable, low-carbon solution which should meet the requirements. I'm also making this point because sometimes regulation, even coming from Europe, confuses that. So what is green steel? If you're making green steel and then you're using the grid, what they're saying that if you're using the grid, then and balancing some of those requirements, even if you buy the RECs and others, then it won't qualify.
Sure.
So those are the kind of problems we need to solve, the policy problems, whether domestic or internationally. Solve those problems and make sure that we are headed the low-carbon way.
Okay, 2.5 minutes to go. Rajneesh, I will take your point there. I saw you nodding right there to make a point. But just to tell all our audiences, after 2.5 minutes, we will be opening the floor for question-answer round as well before the minister really reaches us. So you can, meanwhile, just prepare your questions and be ready. And you can ask any one of the panelists. Meanwhile, I'll just request if the mics are there already to be passed around as well. Rajneesh.
Yeah, I will just agree on 2 points which Anish said. that it should not be like a, copy paste type of thing, which is some other country is doing, we can do immediately the same thing. Because a lot of analysis is required of the grid, where the peak power is to be shaved with the energy storage. It is not that you have a bigger capacity, which cannot be utilized for the entire, that word RTC is not that easy that only this much megawatt has to be supplied constantly. It has to be that peak demand has to be met. And if you have that capacity, that may not be utilized in the daytime when the demand is not there. So all this analysis and balance, I agree with Anish. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, just 1.5 minutes to go. Amit, I wanted to understand, for the common man and for the industry, of course, it will flow in from the industry and then to the common man. On adoption, what would you really tell them out there? If we can also take some votes right here. How many of you, in your homes, in your offices, many of you have businesses as well, have already inched up a little bit when it comes to adoption of renewable energy? Okay, let's talk about, say, over 50%. How many of you at your homes and businesses have already, switched to renewable energy? Over 50%, anyone? Okay, just 2 hands right there. What is the percentage? 60, 70? 60%, okay. 40%, 30%? 20%? 10%? 5%? You can see the show of hands. There is no show of hands, only I think remarkable contribution by some 2 hands, already done 60%. So, you see that lacuna really coming about. How will that adoption and the change of mindset really happen? Anish.
Well, before we go to the supply side and adoption by industry, first thing is that you're possibly asking a crowd which doesn't represent the industrial houses which are going towards that. So we need to ask the appropriate audience for that. I would ask the audience the question that how many of you in your household, not just you, but in your households, turn off the lights when you don't need it?
Okay. Let's ask the panelists first.
Yeah. I do it. My family doesn't do it.
Yeah, we do that.
And I think there's a lot of case where we misuse electricity and energy. I think that's the first sensitization which needs to happen, that conserve energy, use it judiciously. And that's what the Prime Minister also says all the time. It's a message difficult to absorb, but it is what we need to do first. Conserve the use as much as possible. Be very frugal in energy use. And when you are very frugal in energy use, you're automatically cutting down consumption. You can't save better than that.
Will the frugality increase once it is renewable? Because then you think that
there's nothing
it is
to do with
forever
renewables. You need frugality in the first place. Cut down energy. That's the cleanest form to do.
All right. Okay, and with that, we will open the floor for question and answers. The mics are there. Maybe you can raise your hand, and then the mic will be passed around to you. Okay, that gentleman here. Please begin by saying your name and where are you from, and tell me which panelist do you want to ask your question to.
Hi, my name is Mohammad Rehan Akhtar, and I'm part of the Sterling and Wilson.
Okay.
When we have started a 1 megawatt NDPL plant in Delhi in 2010. And I was part of that NDPL plant. See, the question is not that the home. The question has to be there when you are in hotel and when you are leaving the room. How many people are there who switch off the lights?
Mindfulness when you're not paying for it. Okay. Who do you want to direct? So everybody's agreeing with your point right there. Do you have a question directed?
Mr. Anish, because he is saying that one house, I'm saying that one, how many people are there who is switching off?
He does that. I don't know if he can answer on behalf of everyone. Yeah.
And I completely agree with Anish. Okay. Conserve it, and conservation is more than renewable.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the home, because you are paying the money, but when you hotel, when you have paid the money, you think that one, oh, I have paid the money. This is the mentality of the people are there. So how many people
I'll answer your question in a different way. Yesterday I was at the India Energy Week and I was there for the last 3 days. Generally when I leave the room, I turn the AC off also, because otherwise the AC goes on forever. And I turned off the master switch. Every time I was coming to the room, I saw the light still back on. So there's something which is wrong with the instrumentation there, which doesn't make that. So why blame the user of that? There's something fundamentally wrong in the thinking.
Okay, maybe they want it that way.
I was
yes.
telling that
okay, maybe please have the mic passed around. This gentleman there, raising the hand. Please say your name first, from where you are, and which panelist do you want to ask your question to.
Good evening. My name is Manjeet Singh. I am from petroleum industry.
Okay.
Telling the habits about switching off the light at your home or maybe the hotel. there is a PCRA, and in PCRA, which is petroleum conservation, so conservation is very important. I think there is enough education which have been given to the industry on this subject. And I think all of the audience which is available here, they definitely come under somewhere with PCRA. Now, if I talk about my industry, let me tell you that Bharat Petroleum, Indian Oil, Indraprastha Gas, where I was working, all the CNG stations, they have put up the rooftop solar panels, and thus they are converting it to the renewable energies, using the renewable energies. Second thing is, I'm very confused with the panel that all the time they are saying that we cannot go to the 100% renewable.
Okay.
Whereas our Prime Minister is keeping a target of net zero.
Okay.
To achieve the net zero. That means he is talking about no carbon. If I understand, net zero means no carbon.
Sure.
So rather than putting up individually by the industry, respective industry who are involved with the energy sector, to keep a phase-out goals to really achieve that net zero, I think probably that is the most important thing, rather than accepting it that this is not possible.
Okay, do you want to...
Because no, all of the panelists, somewhere have, were countering each other.
Okay.
Kapil? I would just, possibly not answering all what you're saying. All I'm saying is there is a difference between net zero and carbon neutrality.
Yes.
I can try and explain that, but it could take some time, so we can take it offline. But there is a difference. All I can say is that you can still emit carbon in a net zero scenario. You just try to balance it with something else.
Yeah.
So it is not saying that you don't have a right to emit in carbon, but you are trying to do something more to adjust it so that you are net zero.
Correct.
We cannot say by 2070 we will not do any activity which emit carbon. While you are brushing teeth also, the water comes, your toothpaste is made using carbon. So every possible activity has a carbon footprint. Yeah. Restaurants have now started, forget about airlines giving a carbon footprint of the travel what you are doing. In UK, restaurants have started putting what is the carbon if you are taking this dish compared to this dish. So there is not that carbon, the awareness about what kind of GHG emission you are doing by putting in particular activity is more important also, compared to saying that we will not be emitting any carbon, which is possibly a very difficult task.
Okay, does that answer your question? All right. Any other questions? Okay. Yes, please. Please say your name, where are you from, and which panelist do you want to ask your question to?
Good evening, everyone. I am Sharif from Amplus Solar. So my question is regarding this RERTC that we are talking, renewable energy round the clock. Irrespective of the technology that is being adopted, there is still exists a differential between the cost of the RTC power RE and the conventional power. So as industry champions, do you expect the government to disincentivize coal generation in the form of some carbon cess that probably is being practiced in Europe? Is it on our radar?
Okay, which panelist do you want to direct the question to?
Mr. Maheshwari.
Mr. Maheshwari. All the questions are coming to you by default.
No, it's a very, very difficult question because it's very different the way we look at it in India compared to maybe possibly you are talking of Scandinavian country which have been imposing carbon penalties to a tune of $100 to $150 also. India is a growing country while, and being developing country, we would see activities which continues to emit carbon, and just putting in carbon penalty, which is very huge, could reduce the pace of our development. So I would say I wouldn't say what government should do because I think they are best at doing what they know, what to be done. All I can say, at a gradual pace, we can introduce some carbon taxes and penalties so that we will see that industries and even end consumers start towards this shift towards making low carbon technology. So
right.
That's what
Rahul, do you want to?
So again,
sure.
on coal, government has already added certain cess, and other thing, it is also coming in form of even transportation, where railways, there is a additional money being paid, and that is subsidizing the passenger transportation. But one thing I just want to I have been always puzzled. Like, it seems like we are waiting for these flexible renewables or RTC renewables, and when it is going to reach parity with variable renewable. That I just don't understand. Like, if you are standing and if your one leg is on fire and other is on ice, your average body temperature may be fine, but you are not going to survive, right? So for that, you do the air conditioning, you are managing all those things so that you can have the comfortable life. Same goes with grid. If you are looking at adding the renewables, even if, and again, storage is not only for renewables. One of the first projects which was done by AES Corporation with grid scale storage was in Chile, where storage was integrated with a coal plant to make coal plant operate more efficiently. So again, let's stop talking about this as if storage is only for renewables, only if we are going to 100% renewables, we need storage. I think storage is integral part of the grid we need to be using. We have been for last 12 years talking about grid frequency in India. Yeah. Recently with some of the changes in the DSM regulations, everyone is suddenly waking up thinking that, oh, grid frequency has started fluctuating from 49.6 to 50.4. I have data for last 12 years. Every year, the grid frequency, instantaneous frequency has been fluctuating on same way. Yeah. We could have addressed that by introducing, as Amit mentioned, about ancillary services, about introducing small amount of storage, which is only 1 to 2% of the grid, and balancing that, we could have taken our grid into 21st century grid by doing that. Instead of that, we keep on talking about 100 gigawatt, 500 gigawatt, large number, and wait for something for 2050, 2070. The key thing what we need to focus is, how do we start adopting technologies which are already commercial and start moving towards that 100% goal. It may take us 20 years, it may take us 50 years, but if you don't move and if you just stay at a location, definitely you are not going to go there.
Okay, thank you so much, Rahul, for adding on to that. Two more questions. Okay, three more questions. Okay, we'll try and hurry up the question. Please keep your questions short because we will be awaiting the minister anytime shortly. Yes, please.
Yeah, hello. My name is Nitin. I represent Enel Green Power. My question is to Rahul. What about battery energy storage or pump hydro storage? If I'm a consumer, I would bother about it. I don't care which kind of storage it is. So what do you think the storage future of BESS versus the pump hydro storage?
No, so I completely agree with you. Again, I represent India Energy Storage Alliance, right? It is not an India Battery Storage Alliance. What we have been fighting for last 10 plus years is make sure that policies are technology agnostic and neutral, which enable all form of storage technologies, be it electrochemical, be it chemical, be it mechanical, be it thermal. So that's what we have been fighting for. So it's not that it is one or other. There are a lot of technological things where the kind of improvements which have happened with electrochemical or thermal storage, those are very hard to match with mechanical systems. Mechanical systems have some improvement on the control in flexibility. But if you start looking at trajectory and if you're looking at some of these assets which are expected to have a life of 35, 55 or 100 years, and you are seeing there is an alternate technology which may be right now slightly at a premium, but you see a clear learning curve of 10%, 12%, are you going to put in all your eggs in a technology where for next 50 years you are going to be paying based on current differential? Or are you going to be adopting a mix of technologies where in maybe 5 years you may not need some of those technologies? That's where a lot of stranded assets get created in the grid, and we have so many examples around the world where regulators have tried to push a technology just because they felt that was the best technology at given point, but within 5-10 years they have ended up becoming stranded assets.
Okay, Mr. Darwala, you had a question. Who do you want to speak to? Can we have the mic please passed on to him?
Yeah, so there's been a lot of talk about energy storage and requirement of energy storage because of renewables being pumped into the grid. At what stage do you believe it's a necessity? Is it that today, so let's say we've got about 100 odd gigawatt right now. Do you feel that if we reach 200, 300, you won't actually need, it's just good to have technology to start with on energy storage? Or have we already reached a point where it is required for the grid?
So Khurshid, you know my views. We have discussed it maybe 4 years, 5 years back.
4 years back.
Exactly.
4 years is a long time.
So my view was 4 years back, it was required. It is, and again, it is not about moving towards 100%, right? There are things where, for example, we have, I think most of you are solar experts, you know this better than me. We are doing solar clipping. We are actually wasting 20%, 30%. In some cases, I'm hearing numbers which are even 80, 100% in terms of the clipping, where we are wasting all that energy and we are just sort of putting it in a financial structure saying that, oh, that wasted energy doesn't matter. Ultimately, one side we are talking about moving towards clean energy, and then there is a clean energy where we are investing in terms of all the solar panels, all the manufacturing, all the carbon footprint which is going into manufacturing that, and then we are wasting 20, 30, 40% of solar energy which is generated by not using it. So I think storage was required 10 years back. That's where I started, and I've seen the business case keeps on getting better and better every year. Yeah. So you can keep on moving towards more, but storage was already required 5 years back, and even right now it is required.
Okay, Anish
I'll just
wants
add
to make
a little bit, Khurshid, to it. First thing is that we shouldn't see storage as a single use case. Storage is a whole range of use cases, and different technologies serve different purposes. So if you're comparing pump storage versus battery storage, for longer duration of storage, you are possibly better off with pump storage at the right cost point, whereas for shorter duration, as Rahul was saying, instantaneous things, it is possibly battery storage which is going to be better. But I also want to draw your attention to the fact that we have already storage in the form of fuel storage. So you store energy either in the form of fuel, or you produce the energy and store it in batteries or devices, okay? So storage is an inherent need of the power energy system. You just cannot avoid it. The question is that what is the low carbon storage? When you store as fuels and you burn the fuel directly, it becomes high cost, high carbon fuel. Whereas there are alternate forms, basis renewable energy, which we are going, where after the energy generation, we need the storage, and that's where this comes. This equation is changing. I just wanted to bring home the point that storage is inherent requirement, whether as fuel or as energy produced and thing, or as hydrogen, which is somewhere in between, okay, as a necessity of the energy system.
Thank you so much, Anish, and thank you, Rahul, for answering that question. I think a gentleman there was looking for the mic. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. This is Ranjit Singh. I represent Regas Engineering. My question to all the panelists, that we are talking the most important point at the last part of is the energy efficiency. We know the cleanest form of energy today is nothing but the energy efficiency. So when we are talking about that, how do you feel that the solar or any renewables can achieve that maximum level of energy efficiency, number one? And number two, how this can be achieved? And how much time do you think that India can be dependent on renewable sources? Because we see now also we are depending more on a fossil fuel kind of power when it comes to stability in terms of electricity security. So this efficiency point, when I just want to make a point that to anyone of the experts, that when we can be more efficient in terms of solar energy. Thank you.
Okay, and that question is directed to? Everybody says Kapil.
Yeah, anybody?
If I may understand your question, you are saying energy efficiency from renewables. Is that?
Yes.
So I would, possibly it's two different sides of it. Energy efficiency has nothing to do with the renewables. I would say energy efficiency is the way you would use that energy. Most of the time we are talking, when we talk of energy efficiency, replacing these bulbs, etc., with LED. So to me, this looks like the very, very baby step. We really need to move as, as industry or possibly as thought leaders, that this was the first step which we would have done possibly years back. Now we really need to figure out solutions in every single aspect what we are trying to do as an industry. And seeing energy efficiency is the, possibly the minimization. And the minimization, one of the things, as Anish also mentioned, is conserve that also. So only thing what I can say is government is also trying to integrate renewable in all these measures of producing things. So all I can give as an example is the first phase of PLI was not asking for the supply to be renewable for when you are making solar panels. The next phase, it's introduced that 20% of that needs to be renewable. So it's the step in the right direction that while you are trying to promote domestic manufacturing, you are also trying to put some mandates on usage of renewable power.
Okay.
And to add again, one of the reasons why
Kapil and Rahul are the chat GPT now, and they are answering all the questions on the floor. Yes, Rahul.
So one of the reasons why renewables have become cost competitive is because the efficiency at the generation level has been going up, right? So we are seeing solar panels which maybe 20 years back were below 10% efficiency in terms of converting solar energy into electricity. Now we have solar panels which are in excess of 20% or even getting to 30% in terms of the efficiency. If you talk about batteries, one of the reasons batteries have become more cost effective is not just about manufacturing scale up, which is a key part of it, but also because energy density has been improving. So earlier when I started working on energy storage back in 2004, 2005, we were looking at most of the grid scale energy storage electrochemical technologies at a energy density of somewhere around 60 to 80 watt hour per kg. So for 1 kg of materials, you could only store 60 or 80. Now we have multiple technologies which can store between 160 to almost 300 watt hour per kg. And within next 5 years, we are expecting technologies which can even cross the 300 watt hour per kg threshold and head towards 500 watt hour per kg. That means we are 5 times more efficient. It is not 5%. We are 5 times more efficient in terms of using the raw materials, which is storing the energy. And those type of improvements are happening almost year on year.
Well, thank you so much, and that's the time that we have for Q&A session. We'll wrap it up at that. Thank you very much, panelists, Rajneesh, Anish, and also Kapil, Rahul, Amit, all of you for giving some wonderful insights and answering all those questions on the floor as well. We'll be waiting for the minister. He'll be here very, very shortly. We'll take a very quick break. About 9-10 minutes is what we expect the minister to be here. Thank you so much, and continue to enjoy this evening. Warm round of applause for all our panelists. Thank you so much.
warm welcome once again to everybody here, my panel and all the guests and viewers who are tuning in on the various platforms of Business Today Multiverse, including Business Today Television and on Business Today In, as well as Business Today on YouTube and other platforms. My panel here is a very eclectic panel, very well-chosen panel, and I would say we'll be able to get a mix of views in the 45 odd minutes that we have on this discussion today. And since we are talking about future trends, we'll try and keep the focus on the future, and the future is always better. At least that is the mantra that most Indians live by. We look at the future and are able to go beyond the present. I'm going to start with Mr. Ramesh in terms of the subject for our energy transition. Transition is a pretty simple word, but it involves a lot of painstaking detail. Moving out of what is a carbon-fed economy is an imperative for India. It's also backed by the need from a climate point of view, but it's a massive cost. And globally, while the developed nations have been talking about this transition, they haven't really put their money behind where their mouth is as far as helping countries like India achieve this transition in a sustainable and fast manner. But that's the broader picture. What I really want to ask you about is how critical is the role of finance in India's energy transition towards a green, renewable, sustainable future? Mr. Ramesh. Yeah, here you go with the mic.
Thank you, Siddharth.
Just hold it closer.
Yeah. Thank you. Wonderful to see all the ladies and gentlemen, who's who of the industry here. Of course, it all starts with finance. So, I naturally expected this could be the first question for this panel discussion. To give a context, what are the financing, requirement?
Down, take our seats. As soon as he is in, we will begin the next session with the minister.
takes their seats and then we can start, okay? So if everybody just sits down, gets settled, and then we can just get the minister in and start. Session, just put your hand up so that I can see it, and then we'll try and make it interactive and give some people an opportunity to ask some questions. Come, Minister, can we have a warm round of applause as we welcome to the stage the Union Power Minister, Mr. R.K. Singh. No, and I just want to mention before we start that the Minister was actually at a very important family function, and he's actually come out of that family function to be with us this evening, and he has to go back there right again. So I deeply appreciate this. Thank you. Hello and welcome. India has an ambitious target of achieving about 500 gigawatts capacity of energy generation from renewable energy sources by 2030. This is the world's largest expansion plan for renewable energy. And the man who's leading the government's charge in this pivot towards green and clean energy is the Union Power Minister R.K. Singh, our special guest at this Renewable Energy Summit. Can we have a warm round of applause as we welcome the Minister to this program? Thank you very much, sir, for coming here. What we know so far is that this is one of the key thrust areas of the government, and that the targets that you'd set for 2030, some of those targets have already been met. Can you begin by giving us a sense of your broad vision for achievement of this plan, which is being called the world's largest expansion plan towards green energy? How much progress have we made? How satisfied are you with the progress? What are the key roadblocks that you're encountering? Your plan to overcome those roadblocks, and what happens from here? So let's start from there, Minister.
Now, what Rahul wants is actually the whole story. So I'll try to give you the whole story in as succinct a manner as possible. Now, I think there's some facts which you need to know, which we all need to know. One is that climate change is an issue. It's a real issue. It's not a chimera. It's happening. So therefore, this is important. The whole world now is clear in its mind. There is a consensus that we need to do something about it. I'm not talking about the relative responsibilities or who's been responsible for what has happened. But just as a matter of interest, almost 85% of the legacy carbon dioxide load is because of the developed nations. They've added it. There's no dispute about that. Nobody disputes that. Our contribution to the legacy carbon dioxide load is just 3.4%, even though our population is about 17.5%. That is one fact. On a per capita basis, our emissions are 1/3 of the global average. I'm not talking about 1/3 of a developed country, no. It's 1/3 of the global average, which includes all countries, developing and, countries in Africa with very limited access to energy. There are about 800 million people without access to energy today. So we emit, on a per capita basis, one of the least in the world. We are the least one of the lowest emitters in the world. Our responsibility for the legacy CO2 emissions is very, very small, very limited. It's out of, I mean, it has no proportion, no relation whatsoever to the, it has no proportion whatsoever to our population. So that's something which is a necessary background. But we believe in the importance of leaving behind a healthier planet for our coming generations. So in COP21 in Paris, in 2015, we pledged that by 2030, we'll have 40% of our power generation capacity coming from non-fossil sources. Now this pledge was a substantial pledge, both in absolute terms as well as compared to the pledges made by other countries, including developed countries. But we made it, and we've achieved it. We've achieved it 9 years in advance. We achieved it in November 21. In November 21, 40% of our capacity was from non-fossils already. Today, it's 42%. So whatever target we had set to be achieved in 2030, we achieved in November 21. Today, we are already at 42%. That is one fact. Today, my non-fossil capacity is 177 gigawatts. Out of that means 177,000 megawatts. Out of that, 6,800 megawatts comes from nuclear. The remaining is from solar, wind, and hydro, and biomass, little bit, biomass, pure renewable. Nuclear is also clean, but it's not renewable. It's not categorized as renewable. But the targets are set not in terms of renewable energy. They are set in terms of fossil and non-fossil. So the target for us is non-fossil. That is one. Now, because we've achieved this so far in advance, I mean, so much in advance, therefore, we upped our ambition in Glasgow. And we said that now by 2030, 50% of our capacity will come from non-fossils. And then the Prime Minister, this was the NDCs, nationally determined contributions given officially under the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. You give your NDCs, nationally determined contributions. So that is 50% of our capacity by 2030 will be non-fossil. By 2030, I expect our capacity. In fact, I'll need our capacity to be 820 gigawatts, 820,000 megawatts. Today, my capacity, power generation capacity is 410,000 megawatts. So my capacity has to double between now and 2030. Now that's the pledge which we made. That 50% of that will come from non-fossil. So 50% of 820 is 410. But the Prime Minister said that renewable energy, as far as renewable energy capacity is concerned, it will be 500 gigawatts. Now, so that actually makes it more than 50%. It makes it almost 64%. But let me tell you this, we shall achieve it. We shall achieve it. Now, this is a very, very ambitious target, but we shall achieve it. Why shall I achieve it? Because I already have established 177 gigawatts. I have about 75 gigawatts under implementation. So that makes it about 250 gigawatts. I need to do 250 gigawatts more, which I shall do. I am very confident. Why am I confident? Because I am going to do at least 7-8 million tons of green hydrogen. If you talk about 8 million tons of green hydrogen by 2030, now that requires 25 gigawatts per million ton. So 8 million tons will give you 200 gigawatts. So I'm there. Only by green hydrogen. Apart from that, I am adding a lot of capacity, solar, wind to my grid. So I'll make it. But already, our rate of capacity addition has been one of the fastest in the world. We have emerged as the most attractive destination for investment in renewables. All this capacity addition which has happened, we have not had to put in any money. Every major fund in the world is invested here, and more are coming. We have built up a huge ecosystem for renewables. I have at least 15, 16 companies which are, the world-class companies competing amongst each other. Each one of my bids is hotly contested. Now I have added one more ambition to that most of it will be made in India. Now that has been a challenge. Our capacity, so I'll come to that later, but that is one of the challenges which you can note for future discussions. Make in India. That's a challenge we have taken up. Emission, the other NDC was about emissions reduction, straight away. Now, when you replace energy from fossil fuels by energy from non-fossils, you are reducing emissions. But there are other, sectors in which you need to reduce your emissions. Industries. So for industry, we have a program called Perform, Achieve, Trade, in which efficiency standards and emission standards are set for industry, specific standards. If they achieve it, fine. If they overachieve it, they get energy saving certificates, which they can sell. If they underachieve it, they have to buy those energy saving certificates, or they pay a penalty. Now that has resulted in a reduction of CO2 emissions by 106 million tons per annum. 106 million tons per annum. Just in the 4th cycle. I have, underway about 8 cycles. In each cycle, we pick up some sector, some industry sector. Then we have the largest LED program in the world. And that has resulted already in reduction of CO2 emissions by almost about 100 million tons of CO2. We have something called a star rating program. So air conditioners, all these appliances, air conditioners, refrigerators, you name it, we star rate it, 5-star to 1-star. 1-star gets outlawed every 2 years, and 2-star becomes 1-star. That has resulted in reduction of CO2 emissions by 53 million tons. We have put in place an energy conservation building code for commercial and industrial buildings. And that has been adopted in the bylaws of most states. 1 or 2 are remaining. We have come out, and buildings will account for about 24% of our energy consumption. We have come out with another Eco-Niwas Sanhita for residential buildings above 100 square meters. And we are making that also, mandatory by putting it in the bylaw. All told, in 2019, when we carried out an assessment, we had reduced our emissions intensity by 29%, against a target of 33% by 2030, mind you. By 2030, I have to reduce our emissions intensity by 33%. We achieved a reduction of 29% in 2019. I think we are in 23, we would have reached about 31-32%. So that's why, again, we upped our ambition in emissions reduction in Glasgow, saying that by 2030, we'll have reduced our emissions intensity by 45%. Up from 33 to 45%. So in short, we are a world leader in energy transition. And we intend to continue to remain a world leader. Now, what are the challenges? Now, this is not only for energy transition, mind you. This is also for meeting my energy requirements. If we had not added this capacity, we would have had problems, major problems, because our demand is growing rapidly. In the 2 months, November, December, they grew by 25%. Overall, during the year, it has grown by 10.5% over last year. 10.5%. I mean, the fastest rate of growth of demand in any country in the world. That's because we added 29 million consumers. We achieved universal access in 19 months. The International Energy Agency called this the fastest expansion of access in the world, in the history of electricity in the world. No other country has added 29 million consumers, mind you. If you total up the population of Europe, and of 4 or 5 countries in Europe, it will add up to about 29 million. So we connected that many in 19 months. Universal access. So that has led to the demand growing at such a rapid pace. And I could not have met that demand if I were only reliant on thermal. Now, the coal production has grown, but not as fast as our demand. And our demand will continue growing because our economy is growing. Our economy is growing at around 7%. Somebody places it at 6.8, somebody places it at 6.9, somebody places it at 7. But by and large, this is the figure of our rate of growth now. That is what will continue. And for that, we need energy. And coal, as I said, there are limitations to the rapid expansion of coal mining because you need environmental clearance, it takes 2 years. We shot ourselves in the foot by making environmental clearance so convoluted. Then you need to acquire the land, again takes 2 years. We changed the Land Acquisition Act, remember? And we upped the compensation 4 times. That, of course, is one part. But the procedure, we sort of made it convoluted. It takes 2 years. You rehabilitate people, and then you can start a mine. Then you can start a mine. So that is why adding renewables was important. And this is what has enabled us to meet this expansion. I mean, about 25% of the energy was coming from renewables during this crunch period. That crunch period has not gone. And there was a period, a couple of years back when I was so happy, I felt that now we have surplus capacity. But that was short-lived. Now we don't have surplus capacity. So now the challenges. One challenge, of course, is, renewable is not round the clock. Right? So when the sun shines, you have solar. When the wind blows, you have wind. When in the night, when the sun has set, you don't have solar, etc. So you need storage because you need electricity round the clock. Storage is expensive. The whole world, all the developed world has been talking about energy transition and how necessary it is and how climate change is a problem, but they did nothing about it. They did nothing about it. So we have had to start. Now, how could the price of storage have been brought down? By adding volumes, by adding manufacturing? It's not there. It's not there. We have had to start from scratch. So we are adding manufacturing of storage capacity. And we are adding volumes to demand. But guess what? I came out with a bid for 1,000 megawatt hours of storage. The cost came to 10 rupees per unit. And it was one of the largest bids in the world. Today, the largest established capacity of storage is 450 megawatts in California. That's what the developed world has done, nothing. If they had been serious about energy transition, they would have put in place more manufacturing capacity for storage, and they would have added to the demand for storage. So the volumes would have been much more, the prices would have come down. But we have started. And this is what I'm telling you is something which I tell all the developed countries whenever I go to conferences, that you did nothing. So one challenge, storage. Other challenge is the supply chain for storage. 89% of the reserves of lithium, known reserves of lithium, have been tied up by one country, China. 89%. So we have a supply chain problem. We don't want a repeat of what happened in solar, or what's happening in the field of fossil fuel energy. Then, what are the other problems, of course, was the transmission which we have leaked. We have today, I think, the largest integrated grid in the world. It is one grid running on one frequency for the whole country. We added 173,000 circuit kilometers from 2014 till date, and this government has added 173,000 circuit kilometers. We are still adding. Now, for taking the capacity to 500 gigawatts, I have to invest a further 2.4 lakh odd crores for transmission. The good news is that actually I don't have to spend the money. As I said, investment is coming. So I just hold bids that I want transmission line built from A to B or certain transmission line of lower capacity replaced from A to B. And companies bid, whosoever bids the lowest tariff, they get the order, they construct it and give us an uptime of 99.5%. It works. And so I haven't had a problem. So I will put that transmission, additional transmission also in place. The great thing again is that we have made life simple. If you apply for connectivity in Europe, let's say, or in the United States, connectivity grid scale, that means for 500 megawatts or 1,000 megawatts, etc., it will take you an average of 2 years to get that connectivity. In our country, if anybody takes 2 years to give you connectivity, he'll be dismissed. You will get connectivity in the max of 2 months flat. Otherwise, that officer will be proceeded against. We've simplified it. We've come out with something called general network access. That means this is one network, you get connected to it. You just have to bear the cost of that connecting to the network. Otherwise, then you are connected to the whole country, Today you sell power to Assam, tomorrow you can sell it to Tamil Nadu, day after tomorrow you can sell it to Gujarat, wherever. Today you are buying from, let's say, Chhattisgarh, tomorrow you can buy from wherever. One nation, one market. I mean, so that is something which has enabled us to have one of the lowest costs for per megawatt of solar.
So,
my establishment cost is, I mean, it's a long story, Rahul. So my establishment cost for setting up a 1 megawatt of solar, I need $600,000, 4.5 crores. That's the lowest cost. And that's why my green hydrogen will also be the cheapest. Yes.
Minister, in the last few minutes, you've painted a macro picture about India's journey towards this green transition. I want to take up some specific issues, and I'll start with the matter of the import of lithium ion, which is at what, 70%, 3 gigawatts currently, expected to go up 20 gigawatts in the next 3 years itself. And as you said, and we discussed this at Davos as well, that a bulk of the global supply is controlled by China. And you've been Home Secretary, you realize fully the security situation between India and China. Can you give all of those present here at the Renewable Energy Summit your sense of what you're trying to do to reduce this dependency, which is not just an energy dependency, but a security dependency as well? Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, energy dependence is actually a strategic dependence. We are trying 2 or 3 things. One, of course, is that I have carried out a survey of all the possible locations for pumped hydro, pumped storage it's called. We've listed those out. And I have a number of very large companies. They're very large companies. I mean, their turnover is in the region of 70, 80,000 crores, a lakh crores. So I've told each of them, given them target to begin with of 2 pumped storage projects per company to begin with. I have told the states that I want all the pumped storage to be exploited. Hydro. You know, if you don't have storage, hydro is another thing which will balance your solar and your wind. So we are trying to we have identified all the possible hydro projects, and we are trying to start work on those hydro projects. I am going to come out with a bid for round-the-clock renewable energy using green hydrogen or green ammonia as storage. So let us see, that will be a pilot project. If that works, then I won't be dependent upon lithium ion. The world is also trying to look around for alternatives to lithium ion. They are looking at sodium ion and some other chemistries. If that works, again, we'll be sort of away from the dependence for lithium ion. Then we have asked our Ministry of Mines to go out and also tie up reserves. So they are in the process of doing that. A team from Ministry of Mines had gone to Australia. Australia is willing to give us shares in some of their lithium ion mines. So that will mean, again, we'll have beaten that supply chain issue. So that is the major challenge, this storage. Yeah.
Now, PLIs have been given for the renewable energy sector. Your sense of one of the challenges you mentioned is trying to introduce manufacturing in India. That instead of just importing from China, try and introduce and set up manufacturing plants. What progress have you made? What are the problems there? And what's your vision to try and actually make India a manufacturing hub for the entire chain of the renewable energy sector?
Absolutely. You know, when we started out, we had a small industry making cells and modules, not from polysilicon on upwards, but they were importing wafers from China, of course. China has about 85% of the manufacturing capacity for solar, from polysilicon right up to the modules, the entire value chain. So wafers would come from China, and we had a 2,000 megawatt manufacturing capacity for cells, and about 13,000 megawatt manufacturing capacity for modules. Out of that, just about 8,000 megawatts were 500 WP and above needed for grid scale solar. Now, what happened was that that country tried to dump their products here at very low prices so as to kill whatever industry we had. So we put in place anti-dumping duty, safeguard duty we call it. So that didn't work. we extended that safeguard, it didn't work. So we decided that we'll put in place a customs barrier. We put in place a customs barrier of about 40% for modules and 25% for cells. And then we also added another sort of mechanism, which we called approved list of models and manufacturers. So by and large, it's a non-tariff mechanism. So we only buy or only such cells, modules, etc. are allowed which fall in that list of approved list of models and manufacturers. So naturally, I mean, all of it or almost all of it is from India, made in India. So that has acted as an effective barrier. And that has resulted in, that was one step which we took. The other step we took was that we came out with a bid called production linked incentive for making cells, modules right from polysilicon or upwards, the entire value chain. So that was successful. So that has led to 8,790 megawatts of manufacturing capacity under, being set up for the entire value chain from polysilicon upwards to modules. That again will be one of, outside of China, will be one of the largest manufacturing capacity. Most of it was, the China was the manufacturing destination of the world. So now this will be one of the largest. That is not sufficient. We'll need much more capacity. For example, as I said, today the capacity under implementation of solar is about 75,000 megawatts. And the manufacturing capacity of 500 WP and above modules is just about 10,000 megawatts. So naturally, I'll need more. So we have come out with another bid, PLI, Production Linked Incentive bid, which will result in manufacturing capacity of almost 37,000 megawatts from polysilicon upwards and about 65,000 megawatts of cells and modules. So overall, at the end of it, I will have almost about 95,000 megawatts of manufacturing capacity, out of which about 45,000 megawatts will be polysilicon upwards, and the remaining will be cells and modules. So again, it will be one of the largest manufacturing capacities around the world. And the rest of the world is welcoming it. They want the supply chains to be diversified, so they are all for it. So that is one problem which we faced, which we have licked. For battery, we came out with a PLI. Now, unfortunately, what happened was that three bidders won that bid, but they are manufacturing batteries only for automobiles and two-wheelers and three-wheelers. That doesn't meet my requirement. My requirement is grid scale storage. I need batteries which will store 1,000 megawatts per unit or 2,000 megawatts per unit. For that, the chemistry is different. For that, the configuration is different. So we'll come out with another PLI for grid scale storage. That again is something which, as I said, my complaint is that the developed world has just been talking about climate change and have done nothing.
No, so on the issue of storage,
we are having to start.
No, so on the issue of storage, what's your vision in terms of the kind of cost reduction that you think is possible? Because one of the biggest barriers to mass adoption of solar energy is the cost of storing the solar energy, right? So what are you doing? And just as I say this, I want to tell people sitting here, if you have a question you'd like to ask the minister, just keep that ready. We'll try and take a couple of questions from the audience.
And as I told Rahul, I mean, you can ask anything you want, you can ask anything you want. Now, right now, the battery storage is 10 rupees per unit, per kilowatt hour. My renewable energy cost is 2 rupees 40 paise. So the storage cost is 4 times the energy cost. I mean, I would be happy if it were just even equal to the energy cost. Then that means my per unit electricity cost for after 1 hour of storage would be 5 rupees or something like that. I would be happy with that. We came out with another bid for 3,000 megawatt hours of storage using pumped hydro. NTPC came out with that. That was the largest bid in the world. Again, so because our size is huge, our requirements are huge, so whatever we do is huge. Now, so in that we got for pumped hydro, we got a rate of about 3 rupees 50 paise. So that is more manageable.
You know, one of the big players, you said that you have lots
Actually, it's 5 rupees odd, but if you run it 2 cycles, it will be 3 rupees something, yeah.
You know, one of the big players in the renewable energy sector has been the Adani Group, which announced a plan of about 45 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity generation by 2030, which is about 10% of your government's plan for about 450 gigawatts, 500 gigawatts of energy from the renewable sector. Given what has happened over the last few days, are you concerned that some of these investments in the green energy sector could get impacted?
It's not even a blip. Not even a blip. I'll tell you why. Because I have, many large companies which are already becoming multinational. I have one, the couple of companies which are setting up capacities in the Middle East and elsewhere. So I have actually, many large companies. So one company, sort of not doing well or going under doesn't matter. The SoftBank came, they were here, they were competing, but they couldn't compete, so they left. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I am in the happiest situation of everybody wanting to come here. Every major fund is invested here, and everybody who is not invested here is looking around for, people to partner with. Even today, many companies came from Japan, etc., and they said that we want to partner with so-and-so, or we are entering this field. I said, welcome. And I said that you don't necessarily have to partner with any Indian company. We have a totally transparent system. So you can, do it by yourselves. You don't necessarily have to partner it. But if you want to partner it, go ahead. But otherwise, you can do it yourselves also. So I just have to have a bid, and people come. I haven't had to spend any money. And I don't mind I'm not concerned about the name of the person who sets this up. It may be Ram or Shyam or Ghanshyam. I'm just not bothered. The tariff has to be the minimum. And I give a payment security mechanism. You know something? When we came, the power sector was in doldrums. Its viability was in question. Many units had gone sick. You remember? Now the situation is totally different. We've reduced the A&T losses by 5% in 1 year, from 22% to 17%. The outstanding dues of Gencos have come down by almost 40,000 crores. And they are coming down every month. Now there is an automatic system in place that, you can give electricity free to anybody, anywhere. This is what I said to some state governments. You want to give electricity free, go right ahead. But electricity is not free, so you don't want the consumer to pay, you will have to pay. The state government will have to pay. And we put in place a system whereby if the payment does not come on the 30th day, the access of that DISCOM gets cut off automatically. When we put this system in place, the access of 13 DISCOMs to the exchange got cut off. They all paid. Some ministers rang me up. I said, sorry, I can't do anything. It's automatic. So they all paid. And they all pay on dot, 30th day. So my system has become viable. And my system is totally transparent. My bids are digital bids. I have a dispute resolution mechanism which decides within 30 days. That's why everybody is coming.
That's interesting. I have lots of more questions, but I'm happy to take some questions from the audience. If your question is ready, just put your hand up, and then we can have some questions.
And the great thing is that everybody recognizes the India story in energy. Everybody. The president of WEF came to invite me. I had not gone to Davos earlier. I thought that, not worth my time. But he came to invite me in November. And he said that, India has a story to tell in energy. You've done something which the world needs to know. Please come and say it. Then he went back and wrote to me about it. Even then I said 4 or 5 days going and coming is not my cup of tea. I have lots of work, huge amount of work, huge number of things to do. But then I got an order that I had better go, so I went. But that is the point. And the world has recognized what India has done.
Okay, the gentleman in the blue shirt there.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm Dr. Rahul Walavalkar, President of India Energy Storage Alliance. I think the work which MOP has been doing is really encouraging. And with the series of tenders which are expected with hybrid projects with RE plus storage, both for pumped hydro as well as BESS, is something which could be game changer, not just for India, but for the world, as you said. Just one request I have, or one question is that when we started with solar, Prime Minister showed the way when he was a Chief Minister at Gujarat, showing the accepting 17 rupees, 15 rupees as a tariff for kickstarting the industry. We are looking at now green hydrogen, where again we are setting a 10-year vision for reducing the green hydrogen prices and starting with blending. But when it comes to storage prices, we get fixated on the individual number for individual project. Whereas if we start having a very clear roadmap for having a movement towards getting to 25%, 30% storage in next 5 years and have a similar roadmap, then the prices will come down. And the blended tariff is something which is already acceptable. Renew and Greenco have already demonstrated blended RE plus storage prices of under 5 rupees, which given the flexibility it brings to the system will be very useful. So can you share your thoughts on that?
I think that's a very worthwhile idea. That is something which I believe will be very useful. So we can do that, but we have already actually started work on it. We made storage a part of the renewable purchase obligation. The intent is only that. So the renewable purchase obligation means that under the law, we prescribe that your energy will have this percentage of solar or renewable energy, this percentage of wind renewable energy, and total this percentage of renewable energy. We added hydro to that as well. Then we said, no sir, we need to add volumes to storage so as to bring the price of storage down, as a gentleman said. So we said that, okay, we'll make storage compulsory also. So we have added that to the renewable purchase obligation. And the great news again is that up till now, the renewable purchase obligation was issued under the tariff policy. Now we would issue one renewable purchase obligation, and the state energy regulatory commissions, SERCs, would reduce a lower trajectory. Now that can't be done. We have amended the Energy Conservation Act, and we have provided for the renewable purchase obligation trajectory to be mandatory under the law. So we are going to issue that RPO under the law. So storage will become mandatory. So you will see every state adding storage. So you will see the volumes coming up. I mean, that has been there in our mind. Yeah.
Okay.
And then I have also told the government that we have had one PLI. We'll come out with another PLI for storage, because notwithstanding the fact that China has cornered 89% of the reserves, we need to go push ahead with storage if we want around-the-clock renewal. So we'll do that.
Sir.
Yes, my name is Gautam Samanta from Juniper Green Energy. It is the AT Capital Group of Singapore. My background is for 3 decades in the manufacturing, PV solar cell right from the wafer. The first PLI and the second PLI is about to come. And the last week we have heard some news from China that on the technology side, they will be banned, to shift in the India, because India will be the second manufacturing hub. So my question is, sir, how we are protecting ourselves in terms of the equipment and the technology?
China will try its level best. And they will try their level best to make sure that we don't emerge as a manufacturing powerhouse. I believe that we shall. I believe that the bid which we have just put out will attract a lot of interest, and people will come. The Chinese companies probably would not come because the government probably may not permit them to come. That is a matter. That is a matter. If they don't come, they miss out, because we are going to be the manufacturing hub of the world. Number one, outside of China, we are already the biggest market for renewables. We will continue to be the biggest market for renewables well into 2035, 2040. We will be the biggest market for renewables. And more, every country will want to procure from us rather than from China. That's the sense I have got while interacting with different countries in IRENA, in Davos, that they would rather buy from us than from China. So that capacity is going to come into India whether any country likes it or not. And you know what? Most countries like it, except in one country they don't like it.
So second thing is that on the bomb side,
follow-up
question is, on the bomb side you are protecting in the PLI.
But the news you heard is something which I heard myself.
Yes,
and I don't put it beyond them, they'll do it.
Yeah, so in the first PLI, like the domestic content is also a part, like which is Atmanirbhar Bharat in the manufacturing.
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
So we had, as I said, I put up a wall. Tariff barrier is one thing. Tariff barrier means that, okay, so China was selling modules here at, let's say, 10 cents or 100 cents, whatever you call it, 100 rupees. And you add the tariff of 40 rupees, so it becomes 140. Goods from China, the price is 140 rupees. So the domestic manufacturer has a margin of 40 rupees. But in addition to that, I put up total barrier, that ALM. So no Chinese company has been listed in that. So they can't export, because it can't be bought in India. Now, I put up the barrier. At that time, of course, the Niti Aayog said that this is a complete barrier. So I said that, this is necessary. But I have expanded the bidding so fast that my existing domestic capacity is not able to meet it. As I said, I have about 70,000 megawatts of solar only under implementation, and the manufacturing capacity of 500 WP and above is just about 10 gigawatts. So now if I depend only on this, it will take 7 years. I can't wait 7 years. So I have just decided to relax this ALM for 2 years. Incidentally, some countries have gone against that ALM to WTO. We shall fight it. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one question because the counter tells me there's about 1.5 minutes.
Yes, otherwise I'll be debarred from my family. I have to go back.
Yes, very quickly.
Yeah.
Sir, I am from ONGC.
From?
ONGC.
ONGC.
I would like to hear your vision about the offshore wind, sir.
About?
Offshore wind.
Offshore rigs.
Okay, great. Now, offshore wind, what is happening is, we are going to have, 3 types of bids. Number one, there are some sectors, there is 1 gigawatt worth of sector off the shore of Gujarat, which we have investigated thoroughly. So that bid will come out with straight away because the total investigation has been done and all that paper is available. Now, Gujarat is willing to buy power at 4 rupees per unit. So some VGF will be required. Now we'll give that VGF. We are going to come out with another bid off the shore of Tamil Nadu. So there, that survey is not complete. So we'll give 2 years for survey. We'll give 4 or 5 blocks. We'll open it for surveys. So all the companies can go and survey it. And all the thereafter we'll hold a bid for 1,000 megawatts again. So that will be for DISCOM with VGF. So 2,000 megawatts for DISCOMs with VGF. But I will come out with other blocks again simultaneously, just after this bid, simultaneously, where I will say that we'll give you 2 years or about 3 years for survey. So we'll based on lease, and that will allot based on an open bid that area. And after 3 years, you have to set up capacity within the next 3 years. So in 6 years, that must translate into capacity. Otherwise, we'll cancel it. And you will have the right to sell it in open access. We've already opened up the system. So we have said, the rules say now that anybody can set up capacity anywhere in the country or offshore and sell to any consumer. They will get open access. They'll not have to pay cross-subsidy surcharge. And they'll not have to pay transmission charges up to 2025. If you set up 2025, I'm going to extend that. So that is going to be again very valuable, because the price I see of offshore wind coming to around about 6 rupees 50 paise, 7 rupees. Already 6 rupees 50 paise, 7 rupees is good for the industry. So it's already viable without VGF. And the industry will be happy to get it. That power will come after about 6 years. So after 6 years, price of 650 or 7 rupees is nothing. So I see a huge expansion of offshore wind capacity, especially off the coast of Tamil Nadu, because the wind speeds are better there. I am going to give 2 ports, 300 crores per port, for strengthening their the infrastructure. One windmill, with a turbine on top for offshore wind, 15 megawatt, would weigh almost about 1,500 to 2,000 tons. So the normal cranes at the ports, current capacity of the cranes at the ports are not enough to lift that and put it on the barge which will tow it out, etc. So those capacities at the ports will have to be strengthened. Now we have carried out an assessment. It will cost about 700 crores per port. So one port in Tamil Nadu, maybe Tuticorin, and one government port on the western coast. We'll give 300 crores each, so that capacity comes up. Government port, because we want it to be neutral, right? So that numerous players can use that.
Those of you who are sitting here at the Renewable Energy Summit would have seen a spark in the minister's eye when he talks about the transition to green energy, and that's always a good sign. Because usually when Mr. Singh comes to a media event, he's asked about macroeconomics, he's asked about politics. Very rarely does he get an opportunity to expand at length about the effort that he's making in this very important space. We literally had the minister come out of a family wedding, and his whole family is waiting for him currently for him to go back. But since he's committed to us previously, he was very kind to keep that obligation, and that means a lot. Thank you so much for coming. Your family is waiting. We don't want to keep you back any longer, but deeply appreciate you taking out time. Thank you so much, Minister, for joining us.
You see, the energy is a story which the world has recognized. Energy in India is a story which the world has recognized. Both expansion of access, the sort of transition which we have carried out, the volumes which we have added. They recognize that India has done something. But for us, we must keep this in mind, that our country is growing, we'll need to add capacity. We'll add capacity. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure having you.
Concludes this evening. I'd like to now invite Mr. Chandra Kishore Thakur, CEO, Asia, Africa, Europe, and Latin America, Sterling and Wilson Renewable Energy Limited, to give us the vote of thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. I am glad that the event is sponsored and hosted by Sterling Wilson, and Business Today gave us some great insight on the future of renewable energy. In fact, it has been truly inspiring experience today to come together and discuss the future of renewable energy. Today, you have heard about from the experts in the field, the cutting-edge technologies, actions being taken on that. They have shared the ideas about how together you can build a very sustainable, renewable energy atmosphere in the country. We have heard from the expert about the huge opportunities that lie ahead of us in the field of solar, clean tech growth, for becoming the Atmanirbhar Bharat. You have heard from the experts in the field about the trends in the energy transitions, the dynamics of RTC renewables, which includes the wind, solar, and hydrogens. Before I share my thought on today's proceedings, I would like to take a moment to thank the Honorable Minister, Mr. R.K. Singh, who graced this event with his presence. His insights, his visions for the industries is truly inspiring. He has opened up the wide range of opportunities before us. A lot of things which were probably not known to us regarding the India's sufficiencies, the security issues, and the commitments, government's commitments towards meeting the deadline of carbon neutrality. All those things have been really remarkable today. Thank you, sir. We are looking for the greater associations in future as well on this subject. I was really inspired by the amount of knowledge that has been shared by the panelists today in the discussions. We assure that the discussions will see some positive responses within the industries. The panel one, the first panel, comprising of Mr. N. Ramesh, the Deputy MD, Exim Bank, Mr. Sunil from Sungro, Mr. R.K. Roy, the MD and CEO, Ampere Energies, Anis from Deloitte, and Silpa Uprekar from Sterling Wilsons. The panel has widely discussed how the energy transitions will take place. It has been very inspiring to really hear from them that the various challenges which are coming into the way, the opportunities which are there, and how the technologies are going to play a very important role in making this transition smooth. We have also discussed, the panelists also discussed about some of the challenges which seems to be there in terms of the off-takers basically on the adaptations of the tariff. So it clearly came out that for the smooth transitions, unless the state governments, the utilities are keen and they are committed for the adoptions of the tariff, the challenges will continue. The panelists also discussed about the ecosystems around the countries and the broad vision for becoming, achieving the targets of net zero. Some of the very, very interesting the outcomes which panelists one discussed today was, and all of them agreed that the role of the finance is very, very important, right? And if you have to make the very interesting aspect of this discussion was that the cost of the power is basically in India is largely coming from the financing cost. Now, if the overall understanding of this, the financing of the business has to be taken through the policies and seen in the perspective that overall cost can be reduced. So this was very interesting. Thank you, panelists. Thank you for giving your great visions to the audience. Audience has really, for sure they will be appreciating and they'll go back and they will see that how this experience can be used. Mr. Khasi Daruwala, who has been talking about onto the overall the securities of the energy sectors, the differential tariff incentives which to be given to promote to Indian industries and to make the India the Atmanirbhar Bharat. He was also talking about the value chains in the local market, so that even if at the cost of the the growth, if the value chain is given the priority, the overall growth of the industries will be something which can be appreciable. He also talked about the rooftop potentials. Of course, it should come with the storage. So the storage is something which has been throughout the day, this evenings, it has been a talk, right? So Daruwala also touched upon the budgetary supports, which has been quite encouraging, and this has been discussed in both the panels as well, that the government commitment is clearly seen around the commitment for the growth of the renewable energies. The panel 2, which is comprised of Amit Jain, Mr. Rahul Walwakar, Mr. Kapil Maheshwari, Anish Day, and Rajneesh Rotia. So these panels again discussed onto the requirement of the various dynamics of the RTC powers, the capacities of the manufacturing of the solar panels constraints and all those things. They have also talked about the accessibility, security, and the sustainabilities. They have also talked about, the physical policy supports needed to be provided by the governments. They also talked about the consistency into the policies. They have also talked about, the price competitive requirement. They also talked about the energy efficiencies and putting all together how we can achieve the net zero neutrality target by the government of India. As at the end of the day, it's fair to conclude that the event was very meaningful and successful. As you have come to the close of this event, I'd also like to take a moment to reflect on what we have learned today and what can be done to bring our vision into the actions for the energy future to life. We have heard about the many challenges which lie ahead, but we have also heard about the incredible progress through the ministers today that has been made in the recent years. We also know that the renewable energy sources like solar, energy storage, wind, hydrogen have the potential to provide us with the clean, reliable energy for the generation to come. But to realize this potential, we need to take action. We need to continue to invest in research and development. That has been confirmed by the minister as well, that how at every front, through the budgetary supports and through the industry, academia interactions and all those, the much bigger focus is being given. We have to also build more renewable energy infrastructure. That was again reconfirmed by the ministers. And the budget provision for this year also reinstates this fact. We have to work together to bring the benefits of the clean energy to communities around us. So let us leave this event with a renewed commitment to this cause. Let's work together to build a better future for ourselves, our children, and our community. Thank you one and thank you all to make this evening great. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thakur. And as we come to the end of this very thought-provoking, interesting, inspiring, and also insightful event, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Sterling & Wilson Renewable Energy Limited, for their vital support that they've extended to us. I'd also like to thank all our panelists for sharing their take today on how we are actually living through the first truly global energy crisis, and that there is an urgent need now for collaborative actions, not just between countries, but also governments and private partners, industries and businesses, and also citizens, as they develop their short-term responses to the current crisis, the need to reshape the current transition energies, and also to ensure that we make constant efforts towards balancing affordability, security, and sustainability, and rethink energy security in a way that also ensures equitable transition is at its center. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, it's me, Sakshi Batra, signing off. Please do join us for cocktails and dinner, and hope you continue to enjoy the evening with us. Thank you very much. Thank you.